Bobor, kurwa. Ja pierdola, ale bydla.
I kinda can't believe that Dying Light as a franchise is almost 11 years old by now, and with the third Dying Light game, The Beast, only dropping a few 3 or so months ago. I thought it would be a great time and excuse to play through the whole series and see which game is the true Dying Light god of the franchise, as well as doing a sort of whole series retrospective while I'm at it. So I'll go in chronological order, covering Dying Light 1, The Following, Dying Light 2, and Dying Light The Beast in order. And I'll first go over each game's story, and then I'll talk about its gameplay mechanics, the parkour, the combat, the world map, and then finally any extra content or side quests or activities that stood out to me. So let's get this damn preamble over with and drop right into Dying Light 1. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the original Dying Light is one of my favorite zombie games of all time. A first-person zombie survival action, an occasional horror game, with brutal and bloody zombie head-smashing and limb-severing combat, a unique setting where zombies get powered up at night, and a state-of-the-art, brand-spanking new first-person parkour and climbing system to allow you to traverse the zombie-infested, nondescript Middle Eastern city of Haran in some super fun and interesting new ways that first-person games haven't really seen since like Mirror's Edge, if you even remember that game at this point. EA certainly doesn't. Dying Light was developed by Polish developer Techland, who at the time were best known for Call of Juarez, which is a western, both classic and modern shooter series, and their earlier zombie slaughtering game series, Dead Island, and its sequel, Riptide, which Dying Light is a spiritual successor to. Dead Island didn't have anywhere near the same amount of schmooming, but now we go from the fictional tropical island of Banoy to the fictional city of Haran, a Turkish city-state. 2 months before the game begins, a mysterious zombie plague had broken out in Haran, simply known as the Haran virus. Not very creative. While Haran was hosting the World Athletic Games, essentially the Olympics, but not. Which explains why there's a disproportionate amount of Britbongers and Ameriburgers here.
Of course you can do it. Any runner could do it. But there's a catch.
And the virus caused those infected with it to turn into mindless cannibalistic rage beasts, or biters to Haran survivors, with the Haran virus's main feature being its extreme weakness to the sun and UV light, which makes some of the infected zombie bodies start to literally burn away when exposed to that purple light, along with some cases of minor mutations to the human body, resulting in different types of Left 4 Dead-ass special infecteds, which we'll see later. And this virus quickly spread throughout Haran, eventually forcing large parts of the city to be completely walled off and quarantined, and any remaining survivors in the quarantined city zones were left to fend for themselves, with only the occasional emergency airdrop of supplies and a zombie virus suppressant medicine called Antizin to help them out. However, this walled-off status quo won't last, and the Ministry of Defense wants to bathe Haran in some good old-fashioned explosive hellfire to get rid of the virus for good, and no matter what happens, Haran and the survivors still left inside probably won't be around for much longer. But we then start the game in an airplane, taking control of series protagonist Kyle, the Kyle Crane, a field agent for the GRE, or the Global Relief Effort, a totally not evil worldwide organization that coordinates the supply drops for the survivors of Haran. And they're the ones who produce the Antizin, a drug that suppresses the Haran virus and keeps you from turning into a raging corpse, but you need to keep taking it if you're infected. Otherwise, you'll eventually have a crippling seizure and turn into a zombo. They also maintain and monitor the quarantine zone, and they're hopefully working towards some sort of cure for the mysterious and powerful Haran zombie virus. And we get a briefing on Kyle's mission from the unidentified GRE radio lady, who tells us our mission is to drop into the walking corpse-infested city of Haran to locate and secure a sensitive hard drive containing top-secret files on the Haran virus, and a potential cure even. And the GRE claims that this unfinished cure could be turned into a devastating weapon if it falls into the wrong hands, and is currently in the possession of one Kadir Suleiman, a former Haranian military colonel turned zombie city bandit warlord, who now goes by the name of Rise. Not Rise, Rise. Who, according to the GRE, became a crazy asshole after his paraplegic brother was killed by zombies, and he now blames the GRE for his brother's demise, holding the file as his ace in the hole for some unknown gambit that he plans to run against the GRE. But bottom line, he's got the file, and it's on Agent Crane to drop in Fortnite style into the Haran quarantine zone, obtain the file from Rise, and extract. Easy snatch and grab mission. Well, on paper. But Kyle's mission goes to shit pretty much immediately, as his parachute gets caught on the side of a building, and he finds himself surrounded by bandit thugs by the time he's able to cut himself free. And Kyle gets into a fight only 5 seconds after landing in Haran, shooting a bandit with his pistol. But little does Kyle know that Haran virus zombies are drawn to loud noises like kick streamers are drawn to degeneracy. No! No! And Kyle then gets his forearm chomped on by a raging biter, almost dying if not for a baseball bat wielding dude and some, damn, W-Huzz? In this quarantine zone economy? Coming to our rescue, But sadly, our baseball bat-using savior is devoured by a horde of zombies, sacrificing himself so the woman he's with, her name is Jade by the way, can pull us to safety. So within only like 3 minutes, Kyle has shot a man dead, had a stranger sacrifice himself to save his life, got rescued by a baddie, and got infected all in the same insane sequence. And the mission is off to an amazingly atrocious start. Kyle then wakes up 3 days later in some kind of condo, and we learn that we're in the Tower, a high-rise apartment building that's been converted into a survivor base here in the quarantine zone, where the well-to-do, non-bandit thug asshole survivors all live together, just trying to survive each day the best they can. And we explore the place, and get treated like absolute shit for inadvertently getting that guy Amir killed. And we do some slightly too long combat and crafting tutorials. And we also meet some of the main tower residents. We meet the Aldemir siblings, which are Raheem, who's a young and stubborn as all hell teenager with some parkour skills, and his sister Jade, the lady who saved us earlier, who is actually a world-famous female kickboxer, who's nicknamed the Scorpion. And you can spot some of her posters on the in-game walls, and she was slated to fight in the World Athletic Games too. But her plans got a little interrupted. We overhear them argue about Raheem cooking up some kind of plan that involves explosives, which Jade is vehemently against. But this will all come into play later. And we then do a pretty drawn-out parkour tutorial with Raheem, where he teaches us how to climb, run, and jump to best stay away from the zombies, as they're pretty terrible climbers you see, and you can avoid most of them by sticking to the rooftops and just simply jumping over them. And we also learn that all Haran trash piles are softer than pillows and will always break your fall with no harm no matter what. And once that's done, Kyle's then sent to meet Dr. Zara for a dose of antizin, who tells us that the Haran virus is some sort of juiced up version of rabies, and that antizin can only delay the virus, not cure it. So it'll stop the seizures for a time, but you'll still carry the virus. But have no fear. Zara says that he's working on a cure with another doctor in Haran, a one Dr. Camden. But he says that Camden is trapped in Sector 0, or the Haran Old Town, or the game's second map area, which is inaccessible thanks to the quarantine walls, and radio communication with Camden is shitty at best. So for now, progress on a cure is all but stalled out. We then help a tower quartermaster, Spike, set up some car and UV traps for the tower's leader and head runner Brecken, as he's planning a daring sunset run to secure a GRE airdrop of antizin real soon, and they need to act fast and be prepared using these traps, as Rise's bandit thugs have been stealing most of the airdrops recently. So we hop around and arm the traps like a good little errand boy, and even run into our first special infected type, the Goon. Don't laugh. He's a supersized zombie who still seems smart and strong enough to know how to swing a massive rebar club around at you and knock you off your feet constantly. And on hard difficulty, he's an absolute sponge of health. But we kill the Gooner and then go to sleep. But when we wake up, we learn that Brecken's run had failed and his men had died. And Brecken himself got a bad head injury for his troubles, which will keep him from making a run anytime soon. We can actually see Brecken's run in the classic Dying Light Good Night Good Luck trailer, where he almost makes it to the drop after losing his whole squad, and even dodges a volatile or two. But then he gets clonked on the head from behind by a guy with a baseball bat. Youch. So we meet with Jade and Dr. Lena, the tower's only medical professional, and the bloke Brecken himself. And Crane, ever eager to prove himself useful, immediately offers to take Brecken's place and go for the next airdrop himself, as otherwise, the tower would have to make a deal with the devil himself, Rise, to get any antizin, which surely won't end well for anyone. And despite Crane's relative newness to this whole zombie parkour thing, Brecken agrees to let this curiously skilled and totally not a secret agent guy take his place. Dr. Lena also tells us to get some seizure medication for Brecken's mild head injury, which isn't as minor as he'd want you to believe, which introduces us to the side quests of Dying Light, but I'll talk about those later on. But we head out and eventually get to the airdrop, which is full of antizin. Jackpot. And Crane contacts the GRE to tell him that he's got the antizin, but the GRE wants to force a meeting with Rise under any circumstances, and they demand that Kyle burn all the antizin, which would condemn multiple tower residents to die slowly of zombie rabies, and Kyle has no choice but to comply, as he still believes in the GRE's mission as of now. But as we burn the Zin in a pretty cringeworthy scene, night finally falls on Haran, and then we spot two volatiles through a fence, and then have to immediately make a getaway, or else Kyle's ass is going to get mowed like grass by these night freaks. And the volatiles are the most fascinating special infected in the entire game, and they're sort of the mascots of the Dying Light franchise by now. Volatiles are the strongest of all the zombie variants, and only come out at night to prowl and hunt the streets of Haran. They have hardened gray skin, large protruding rib spikes, and a split lower jaw that kind of makes them look like the elites from Halo. Like if Master Chief Mpreg the Arbiter, they'd give birth to this unholy love child. Volatiles are fast as fuck and they hit like trucks, making them by far the hardest enemies to fight in the entire game. But they have one major weakness, as volatiles are extra weak to sunlight and UV light, as they flee to dark areas during the day and can be stunned by UV flashlights and UV glow stick items. But we flee through the night, which I'll talk about later, and make it back to the tower, where they're having an all-hands-on-deck meeting on what to do next. And Crane offers to meet with Rise personally to trade for some antizin, as the tower needs medicine ASAP. So we head on over to his base, everyone hoping that Crane's newness to the zone will make it easier to make a deal with Rise. And we arrive and meet his right-hand man Tahir, and the Riser himself, who is busy torturing and chopping off a dude's hand to show how cruel and nasty he is. We then come face to face with the big bad himself, Rise's bare, muscular, and tattooed chest out from under his evil suit outfit to establish dominance over Crane. And Rise kind of carries himself like an edgy philosopher, dictator, torturer.
Your services, your loyalty, perhaps I should take both.
And he has us work with this surprisingly chill guy named Kareem to help restart some radio towers in exchange for a crate of antizin.
You from Texas? You a cowboy?
I'm from Chicago.
Okay, Al Capone.
And along the way, we run into our second special infected, the Toad, a frog-like mutant who spits acid bombs at Crane by ejecting his stomach out of his mouth. And this is a mutation that seemed to only affect people who were wearing backpacks, I guess. But we smash these toads and turn on the towers. But when we return, Ryzen decides to double or nothing his offer while talking like an even more evil version of Andrew Ryan.
Do you live by your own rules, Crane? Or are you merely someone else's puppet? I believe I know the answer.
And he says that he'll give us 2 crates of antizin if we also shake down some survivor settlements mafia style.
How about I break both your legs and drag you through the streets back to Rice's place, huh?
And do some various other bitch work for him. Which we do, running into another special infected along the way, called the Bomber, a zombie with all his stomach guts hanging out, who runs up to you, pulsates for a sec, and then explodes like a grenade. And if they're close to you, it's a death sentence. And their loud explosions will then summon virals to your position that you have to deal with later. And I've had plenty of times where I was insta-killed by a bomber running up behind me, or just appearing from around a corner and obliterating my ass. But once that's done, we return to see Rise doing some even more evil maxing, by shooting his own men to discipline them, where he then scolds Kyle for being a follower errand boy bitch, and not a Chad leader like him. It only gives us a few scraps of antizin instead of 2 crates, and he instead tells us to bring him Jade for the full antizin, which Kyle just outright refuses, even though the GRE is completely on board with this human trafficking plot and letting us give Jade to Rise and letting him do God knows what with her.
He wanted me to kidnap Jade Aldemir and dump her with him so he can make her fight in his pit.
Yes, and? Was that it?
What do you mean, was that it? I'm not a fucking human trafficker.
Give her to him. You'll be there to keep an eye on her, won't you?
What the fuck kind of humanitarian outfit are you guys?
Because they're totally not evil, but things are looking grim at the tower. People are turning and dying, including some children, which makes Brecken crash out on his TV. But we calm him down, and Kyle convinces him to not make any rash choices for now. And we also meet Raheem again, and we hear his full plan with the explosives. A nearby tower has been turned into a volatile nest, and Raheem wants to blow up the whole building to make the slums safer and hopefully more volatile-free. But he currently has no explosives to even pull off this operation yet. Also, the GRE calls and says that they're pausing antizin drops because it would be, quote, not politically advantageous, which makes Kyle seriously reconsider his loyalty finally. And he tells the GRE to fuck off.
You assholes take the fucking cake, you know that? You and your fucking file.
But he'll still send him the file if he gets it. But after that, we get a radio from Jade, who says she spotted Rise's men hauling crates into a nearby school, so maybe there's some antizin in there. So we infiltrate the school and do some shitty human versus human combat. And once we clear out the school, we end up not finding any antizin, but what we do find is a trove of plastic explosives. We're all thinking the same thing. And Jade begs Crane to not let Raheem get his hands on these explosives. And Crane tries to big bro Raheem and tell him not to try to blow up a zombie-infested building too rashly, and to let old big bro Kyle handle it with his protagonist powers. And Raheem seems to agree for now, and Pinky promises not to use the explosives Crane is leaving at the tower for him to steal, but I highly doubt he listened to a word Crane said. But no time to worry about asshole kids, as we then have to help Dr. Zara get a bolter tissue sample to help his research, a new type of special infected that's covered in unsightly green boils and bumps. It only comes out at night at these marked bolter feeding ground icons, and they're very skittish, so if they spot you, they'll run away from you. But when you kill them, you can swipe their tissue samples as a legendary crafting material. So we get the sample and drop it off with Zara, but once we're done, we get a call from Raheem, where to the shock of absolutely nobody, he ignored Crane and Jade's warnings and took some of his guys to go blow up the nest. But they fucked up, of course, and were attacked by zombies, and we chase after him and find Raheem's buddies all dead, and Raheem himself is hiding in a train car, but now he has a mysterious injury. But he says, it's fine, trust me bro. And before we can examine his wound, the little prick hands Kyle the now armed explosives, as he just armed them thinking he was going to be overwhelmed. This kid is a fucking maniac. And we now have only 5 minutes to bum rush into that building, plant them, and make those nasty volatiles homeless. So we run into the zombie-infested building, plant the bombs, and bug the fuck out while being chased by raging virals. And the plan works. We detonate the explosives, and the whole building comes down in a massive implosion. But it sounds like Raheem is fading fast on the radio. And when we return to him, we find Raheem, freshly turned. His wound was indeed a bite wound, and the little bastard lied to us yet again. And Kyle is then forced to break the poor zombified kid's neck, which I thought zombies were usually immune to, but no matter. It's just a devastating blow to Kyle in the tower, and it's a moment that really drives home Dying Light's bleak tone extremely well, as not even the youngest of the survivors are spared this nightmare.
You goddamn stupid fucking kid!
But as we return to the tower to discuss Raheem's death with Brecken, Jade walks in and overhears that her brother had left his mortal coil and became an undead monster, and this bitch-ass white boy just broke his neck, and then she runs off completely distraught. But just then, an explosion goes off at Zara's trailer, and Rise's men had attacked him while we weren't looking, as revenge for Crane and Jade attacking his school base and killing his men. So we kill the attackers and learn that Zara had been kidnapped and brought to Rise's compound. So we make chase and bust into Rise's base, killing his men and even finding a rifle to use against them, as this game has decided to momentarily turn into a really shitty version of Call of Duty. We also get a radio call from not the GRE, but the Ministry of Defense on the radio, who say that this zombie virus quarantine nonsense has gone on for way too long, and they're gonna bomb Haran right away. But then Kyle convinces them to stand down for 48 extra hours. But once we gun down Rise's men and make their heads explode into bloody chunks just from bullets, we find Zara in a back room. But then we get immediately captured and thrown into a zombie gladiator pit by Rise, where we then gotta fight off zombies for our survival, and even face off against a boss level special infected, called the Demolisher, as denoted by his boss health bar. It's a massive muscle beast zombie who's decked out in protective riot gear, who charges at Kyle, swings his arms around, and even rips chunks out of the ground and chucks it at Kyle to try and kill him. And to beat him, you first gotta notice that its back armor plate is peeling off, so attack his back while he's stunned after you bait him into running into a wall or shipping container or anything. And once it's knocked off, it'll reveal the demo's gouged out back weak point, and just rinse and repeat until he's dead. Again. But once that's done, Kyle begins suffering from another HV seizure, mostly incapacitating him. And then Rise comes down to snarkily compliment Kyle's gladiator skills and tells us his philosophy about how chaos is the true order of existence and he's the most chaotic motherfucker of them all. And he tells his man on the radio to go ahead and publish the GRE file, which would more or less doom all of Haran, as the GRE would no longer have any reason to not bomb it to smithereens. And he also reveals that he knows that Kyle is a GRE agent sent to steal the file from him. And he then drops a truth nuke and says that the GRE isn't looking to cure the virus, but rather weaponize it and sell it to the highest bidder, which honestly sounds like an excellent idea that won't backfire at all. But as Rise commands his men to kill Crane and he walks away all dramatically, Crane locks in harder than he ever has in his entire goddamn life, and more or less activates his King Crimson stand, disarming Rise's goons with a high kick before grabbing a machete and slicing open his men, and even taking Rise's hand clean off all in like a split second, a glimpse of the beast within. But we then try to rescue Zara, but realize that he's got a knife buried in his chest, and he dies pleading with Crane to save the innocent survivors still trapped in Haran, as Rise screams in rage and cauterizes his missing hand on the spot with a heated metal bar, desperately trying to salvage some of the aura he lost getting his mitt sliced clean off by a GRE goon having a seizure. But Crane escapes the pit under heavy gunfire and suffers more zombie seizures until he collapses outside of Rise's compound. We then wake up at a fishing village safe zone with Brecken watching over us, and we get an update on what's happened since we almost greened out on zombie germs. Zara is dead, and Dr. Camden's lab was attacked by Rise's goons, who have found their way into Sector 0. So Camden had to lock down the facility and flood it with infected to keep the bandits out, and Jade has gone to Sector 0 alone to try and help him. So Crane, ever the woman respecter, decides to go after her too, and try to make it to Sector 0. As Brecken tells us that a group of survivors called the Saviors may be able to get us to the sealed off Haran Old Town. So we head out, and learn that chill guy Kareem actually got us our gear from the arena back. He's the only guy in Rise's squad with a soul, it seems. So we find the Saviors, who are icy to Kyle at first.
Get your ass out of here or I'll stop being so fucking polite.
Until they find out that he was the guy who degloved Rise. So they decide to let me pass through, as everyone hates him and his thugs. So dismembering Rise has turned Crane into a bit of a minor celebrity in the Haran quarantine zone. And it turns out the route to Sector 0 is through Haran's massive sprawling sewer system, but the Saviors betray Kyle halfway through the journey, as Rise's men barge in and try to gun me down while I swim through sewer water. But Kyle makes it through regardless, and guns them all down instead, and we finally step out into Sector 0, the game's second main area with tougher enemies and taller buildings to expand the parkour opportunities by quite a bit. We then radio Brecken for directions, who gets us in contact with a woman named Troy, who runs a small survivor group called the Embers, who live in Sector 0's second tallest tower. And who are the Embers, you may ask? Just some guys and a gal living in a tower. So we meet the Embers and try to talk to Jade on the radio, who still blames Crane for Raheem's death and is determined to avoid Kyle like the plague. But at least we come clean and tell her that we're a GRE agent, which only pisses her off more.
You bastard!
Jade?
But hey, all healing starts with honesty, you know? So we look for her at Haran University, which is now another survivor safe zone, and we meet Spike again, who is just out here chilling to offer us some quartermaster services, where you can get a small selection of free weapons, med kits, and supplies each day. You also turn in supply drops you collected for survivor points to help level up your overall survivor level. But Spike more or less becomes completely irrelevant to the plot after this moment, and he's just here to give you free shit in survivor XP. The survivors say Jade was here, but she left. And after that, Troy radios us to tell us she's got something for us to see, and she shows us a news report from the outside world on her laptop. And the report is about Rise releasing the GRE file, as the GRE is now implicated for being a bunch of greedy, murderous assholes. But more importantly, the government is now claiming that there are no survivors left in the Haran quarantine zone, and they plan to bomb it to rubble very soon to cover their tracks. But Troy and the Embers have a plan to prove that there are still survivors alive in the QZ, and the plan is to create a few controlled explosions in a building in such a way that no zombie could ever trigger, which has Kyle fighting through a cramped apartment building full of biters and infinitely respawning virals to plant detonators on gas-leaking stoves. And we also run into another special infected here, the most grim one yet too, a small, child zombie called the Screamer that screams really loudly and attracts raging virals to its location. Now, having a child zombie is a pretty ballsy move. Dead children is risky business with the ratings boards, so I'm kind of surprised Techland got away with this at all. But they make it work because the zombie kid's screams make Kyle cover his ears, and he can only dispatch these baby biters by shushing them essentially, covering their mouths until they're incapacitated. But you can also just whack the corpse to make blood explode out of it. But regardless, we plant all the detonators, which when exploded, makes a massive burning frowny face in the side of the building, showing the outside world that humans are indeed still alive in the HQZ. However, as if on cue, a fighter jet bombs the building, covering up the evidence of survivors. The government is bombing this place, survivors or no survivors. But now it's at least confirmed that they can't be trusted whatsoever. But at least our work isn't all for naught, as Jade sees the face and realizes Kyle is still on their side. And now that she's a little less mad, she's now willing to meet Crane again at a certain Red House meeting point. But when we go to meet, we're not met with the Scorpion, but instead with a message written in blood on the wall taunting Crane, saying that Jade was brought to the Haran Museum, leaving us with no choice but to follow. And we get into the museum by swimming through its flooded basement levels with dying lights extremely slow swimming mechanics. And we get inside the museum, where we see Jade being held hostage and Rise 6's goons and zombies on Kyle. But nothing can stop Kyle Crane while he's on his Huz quest, and we finally find Jade in a central room, who is looking green and sickly. It's not looking too good, with Rise and Tahir lording over us the whole time, sending more zombies after us. And once they're all dead, Rise then throws down one dose of Anazin to torture Crane and Jade some more. Crane adamant about giving it to Jade, but she resists him and tells him to promise to kill her when the time comes. But the virus seizures are whooping Kyle's ass, and he soon finds himself in a hallucinated world full of floating broken buildings and disappearing Jade ghosts, where Jade talks about all that's happened, how she forgives Kyle for Raheem's death, and opening up about her struggles with blaming Kyle for Amir and Raheem's deaths, and that he needs to keep living so he can finally stop Rise and prove their lives and deaths actually mattered and weren't in vain. And at the end of the hallucination, we're confronted by a zombified Jade, who we then realize isn't a biter yet, but she gives us the last Anazin dose. And she then fights off some of Rise's thugs, but she eventually turns, having a buffet on one of the men's necks, and Kyle is forced to end her like he ended Raheem, via broken neck in another brutally bleak moment. But there's no time to mourn, as that thug asshole Tahir jumps down and tries to kill Kyle, but Crane uses his Ameriburger rage to kill Tahir and all of his men after a complete clusterfuck of a boss fight. And we then get our revenge on Tahir, slice his neck open, and take his sweet orange level rarity machete with us. And next, we meet again with the Embers and move to turn on some massive radio towers and to hook them up with amplifiers to allow contact in and out of the HQZ again, where Kyle is taken to this stormy but separate part of the map where we fight lots of infected and climb lots of tall ass towers to get the comms back up. And we then send out a radio message to anyone that can hear that survivors are still alive in the zone and that the government is lying about everyone being dead. And our message comes in at literally the perfect moment, as a squadron of jet fighters hear our message and call off their firebombing run at the last second. Haran was literally just seconds away from an explosive and fiery baptism. We also reestablished contact with the GRE, who are now willing to forget about the file getting out if Kyle can bring them Camden and Zara's research to help them create a damage control cure, after their embarrassing secret that they actually want to kill everyone got out. So we then move to reach Dr. Camden in his zombie-infested lab, which we make it through after cutting down a sizable horde of shamblers. And we finally get to dap up the doctor, and we hand over Zara's samples. And we also learn that Amir, the guy who got turned into zombie chow in the first couple minutes of the game thanks to our terrible skydiving skills, was also a GRE agent like Kyle, who helped keep Zara and Camden alive. But I'm not really sure how him being a GRE agent really matters, but he seemed like a chill guy who was respected by all. And for that, he has mine. LLA. Camden says that Zara's samples are viable and promising, but cure work will take some time. So in the meantime, Crane needs to talk to the GRE assholes and settle this shit for good. But when we use the radio, Rise picks up, who spouts some bullshit about chaos and what it means to rule oneself. And he says that he and Crane are locked in an ideological war. A war of Rises. Fuck everyone and kill everything I don't like, and you're a worthless pussy for not being a mass murderer, thug bandit warlord mentality. And Crane's trying to help and protect as many people as you can is a good thing, actually. Philosophy. But Kyle's completely sick of Rise's chaos bullshit by now.
There is no war. There's only your fucked up outlook. Go to hell.
But Rise is at the top of his massive unfinished tower and is planning to strike a deal with the GRE to extract him with Zara's research, which we can't be having. So we run back through the sewers and make it to his tower and start running, having to run past one last massive horde of virals and volatiles. And we then ascend the tower as Rise waffles on about his whack-ass life philosophy over the intercom. And we even run into Kareem, who was fatally injured by Rise, discarded like junk by his boss. So to get back at his boss, Kareem tells us about a detour that we can use to reach the top and take out Rise. Good guy Kareem goes out helping us. Rest in power, King. In another life, may you choose better employers. And we do a bit more fun parkour up this huge building and confront Rise on top of his Rise, who has the hard drive with Zara's research on him. And we have our final boss fight with Rise, which is literally a super easy WASDA QTE. It's a tad disappointing, but I guess it could be a little nostalgic for those 2000s era of games with QTE bosses like Resident Evil 4, I guess. I say in my not coping voice. But we use our QuickTime event powers to redirect Rise's machete right into his gut. And then Rise taunts Kyle to get him to kill him. But Kyle says fuck that shit. He's done with Rise and his master-slave bullshit.
God, will you just shut the fuck up?
You don't even give him the satisfying death he wants. And Kyle finally recovers the file. But Rise ain't done yet. And he and Kyle scrap precariously on a suspended shipping container. Kyle getting knocked off the thing and has to hold on for dear life. And as Rise crawls over and tries to push Crane off, Kyle rips out the throwing knife Rise chucked into his shoulder at the beginning of the QTE fight, and he buries it in Rise's neck, who then falls off the crate and splats far on the ground below. Rise? More like fall, am I right? And we then confront the GRE helicopter hovering nearby, and Kyle says he won't hand over the research data, as it'll keep the GRE from firebombing Haran until Kyle decides to hand it over, keeping Haran and its survivors alive for now. And the GRE tries to convince Kyle to hand over the drive by just saying, bro, you actually care about these poor survivors? That's kind of cringe, buddy. Why don't you just let them die or something? I mean, who even cares, man? But Kyle is unfazed, as he knows the truly right thing to do is to stay and help the survivors in Haran until Camden can maybe synthesize a cure. And we hear Camden say the results are looking promising so far on the radio. So hopefully, Haran and its people may still be saved. One day. And with that, the GRE chopper flies off, and we hear a warning from the tower that night is coming, and the main story of Dying Light 1 comes to a close. Now, while this story ain't perfect, and certainly won't win any writing or acting awards, I always find myself coming back to this game and its main quest, as I believe the main concept of the plot is some really fantastic shit. A zombie virus with the fresh twist that darkness empowers them and leads to all kinds of mutant abominations like volatiles is a great and interesting, if slightly derivative idea. And the unique concept of the zombie outbreak being contained in a quarantine zone where the whole world is watching on from safety, where you can still see the lit up buildings of the unaffected parts of Haran still glowing in the distance like nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, the quarantine zone is a nightmare realm of monstrosities, death, and hopelessness. It's a really interesting setting that I still find super interesting, unique, and pretty compelling. And trying to help the survivors of the tower and coming to know and even care for them is also some pretty compelling shit. And it makes moments like the Aldemir siblings' deaths and the desperation Brecken and the survivors feel to get any Anazin they can get their hands on feels earned and bleakly brutal in the best possible way. And Kyle Crane himself isn't the greatest protagonist ever. He has no complete arc and is always trying to do the most amount of good and always tries to help as many people as he can no matter what. Even if he was misguided by the GRE to start. But he soon comes to hate them without much internal conflict, and his purpose is clear pretty much the whole way through. Plus, I enjoyed the voice performance from Sonic the Hedgehog himself. Roger Craig Smith as Kyle Crane, who I believe just has the perfect what I would call protagonist's voice, and he has some genuinely good moments, like when he has to kill a zombified Raheem and crashes out over the grief. And all of his interactions with Rise after he's decided he's over his chaos rules, might makes right bullshit is just gold. But speaking of Rise, the villains here are by far the weakest parts of the story. Rise is a solid setup. A former military official driven to murderous cruelty after his brother was killed after the GRE refused to extract him, who now leads a brutal bandit faction in the quarantine zone. But in execution, Rise just comes off as cartoonishly evil and callous just for the sake of it, sounding like an edgy first-year philosophy student who thinks murder is justified as long as you fancy yourself as a free thinker or something. It really doesn't make sense and just sounds like cope over the fact that he loves being a murderous bandit thug warlord who terrorizes the survivors just trying to make it through the days and horrifying nights in the zombie-infested open-air prison that is Haran. He runs the generic bandit faction, and these bandits pretty much just steal from, murder, and terrorize the poor tower survivors with not much else to them. Also, the GRE being the twist villain is fine on paper. It's pretty clear from the jump that they're shady as fuck and are not telling Kyle the full story about what's really on that file, but their plans and motivations are just, I just always found them to be incredibly generic and again, cartoonishly evil. I understand weapons can make you a lot of money and war profiteering is a very real thing and it's very common, but you're not making like a toxic gas weapon or like a new type of flesh-melting bomb or something. This is a goddamn zombie apocalypse virus that you can barely control as is, and you want to make it into a weapon? Kill your enemies? Nah, son. Turn your foes into cannibalistic rage beasts that can mutate into things like volatiles and demolishers? That's a genius idea. Einstein kneels. What could go wrong? And you really think you can harness the virus and not lose control of it? There's just like 9 trillion ways this could end up being a complete disaster that destroys the whole world. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And it just makes the GRE seem like way too evil to be even taken remotely seriously as a logical entity. But besides the weak villains, and some occasional bad or annoying story segments like the first-person shooter sequences, and fighting lots of Rise's thugs in small rooms, the story here has a great premise, is mostly compelling and fun the entire time, it isn't too overly drawn out, or padded with extended dialogue or pointless missions. You could crush the whole main questline in under like 8 hours, if you know what you're doing. And this main story is still a great time to chop, bash, parkour, and occasionally shoot through at the end of the day. So with all that out of the way, let's move on to gameplay. Starting with the parkour and first-person movement. Parkour is Dying Light's main mechanic, and it's probably my favorite part about Dying Light itself. Parkour is incredibly simple. Use shift or alt to start running, and space to jump. And to grab shit and to start climbing, just hold space, and look at the ledge or object you're trying to climb, and Kyle should grab on and start climbing. And it works really well, despite the occasional bug or two, like colliding awkwardly with climbable geometry or getting temporarily stuck, or say you're aiming for a ledge or an object you really think you should be able to climb and Crane simply doesn't grab it. The parkour works almost damn near flawlessly, and it just simply feels good to use. When climbing up ledges, there's a great feeling pop and follow through as Crane grabs onto a ledge and gets himself to a higher position. And I swear Dying Light has one of, if not the smoothest first-person platforming I've ever seen in a game. It's just pretty fun to just move around the game world to see how saucy you can make your schmoomit. As you play a little, the floor is lava as you travel across the slums in Sector 0. And it gives you plenty of ways to cleverly avoid zombies and to stay off the biter-infested streets of Haran as you build up your parkour skills. And the best part? Kyle gets better and faster at parkour as you level up your parkour level, which goes up whenever you climb, jump, or vault on pretty much anything, which unlocks awesome new parkour skills and moves that change how you move around the map. It offers a real, noticeable sense of progression as you play through the game. You can climb on pretty much anything that isn't a flat surface to help you grind out these parkour levels. And to start, Kyle is kind of fat and washed at climbing and running. He's slow and clumsy when he pulls himself over ledges, and he gets winded pretty fast just from running normally. But every 6 or so parkour levels, you can increase your climbing speed conditioning. So you go from struggling to hoist yourself over short walls and buildings to hauling yourself up and over in no time. And it feels great to get faster and better at the parkour. And it makes moving around Haran even more fun, interesting, and satisfying the more you play. And the game is structured in a way that continually ramps up the parkour as you level up your skills. You start in the slums, which has shorter buildings and more ground level obstacles to jump on. And it lets you get acclimated to the parkour and to help you grind up your skills with easier and safer jumps and heights. And by the time you reach Sector 0, your parkour is faster, and the game goes more vertical with more dangerous and rewarding parkour, and even more dynamic movement opportunities. It's some really great stuff and makes you feel like a true monkey man as you scale these taller buildings. And the fun keeps rolling when you unlock new moves like the tackle charge, zombie vault, slide, and even more advanced moves like the tic-tac, which will allow you to run on the side of flat walls for a short time, for some extra advanced and only slightly extremely floaty schmoomit. And the ability to press C when landing after a long fall to roll and cancel all your fall damage, and of course, the best move in the entire game, the drop kick. Or while running, You can jump and press E in midair to dropkick the stupid biter in front of you, which you can further power up with the dropkick bomb skill that sends them flying even farther. And like a decade later, this move is still endlessly fun to pull off, especially when blasting those Sector 0 zombies off 5-story buildings. Never gets old. I love it. Which is helped greatly by some awesome zombie physics of them just getting launched by your legs. And finally on parkour, if you get your survival up to level 12, which you level up by completing random encounters, doing main and side quests, and returning supply drops, with the sole penalty for dying and dying light being that you lose survival XP, which essentially just makes you level up way slower if you're constantly sending Kyle to hell. But once you reach level 12, you can unlock the grappling hook, which you can pick up for free from a quartermaster, and this thing is fucking insane. And it turns Kyle Crane into fucking Spider-Man. Well, more accurately, Rico Rodriguez from Just Cause 2. Just press the mouse wheel, and Kyle will chuck the hook, and will get pulled right towards where he's aiming, allowing you to scale the several stories tall Sector 0 buildings in like a second or two. And this thing is just insanely OP, and it pretty much completely trivializes parkour and climbing as a whole. But it's also just extremely fun to use, as not even the fastest raging alpha volatile can keep up with Spider Crane when he's slinging that grappling hook around. And overall, the parkour in this game is excellent. It's probably my favorite first-person movement system of all time, not counting the other Dying Light games, of course. Moving on to combat, things get a little bit more mixed, with some pretty great highs and some pretty low lows, as combat here is simple and solid. Well, mostly. Most of the combat is bashing and slicing up zombies with looted pipes, knives, machetes, baseball bats, hammers, picks, sledgehammers, shovels, sickles, and pretty much any other type of handheld weapon you can really think of. You have a light swing, a power attack you have to unlock via level ups, and when wielding two-handed weapons, you can unlock a devastating spin move, where you swing your weapon a full 360 degrees around yourself to give yourself some space and send biters flying back. And all weapons have a durability and a limited number of repairs, denoted by this hexagonal hammer icon, where weapon repairs cost 1 metal parts to fix, making metal parts an extremely important resource. But if you take the time to loot and break down any weapons you don't use or broke, you'll be flush with dozens of metal parts soon enough. And the real-time weapon damage details and improvised fixes look pretty damn good on these weapon models. You can also, of course, upgrade and modify weapons to give them fire, shock, poison, or bleed effects. You could build the ultimate jury-rigged apocalypse weapon that lights zombies on fire while simultaneously electrocuting them. But you have to loot quite a bit and have to do a pretty solid amount of side questing to get the best mod blueprints and crafting materials. But no weapon mods or orange tier weapons can even come close to the single best weapon in the entire game. Kyle Crane's legs, which unlike wimpy metal weapons, can never break. I already mentioned the dropkick move, but you can also kick by pressing E, which is great for spacing out and stunning zombies, as well as knocking them off their feet. And later on, after you level up a bit, you can unlock the stomp attack, where you can instantly kill any zombies that are on the ground or are below you, which is a godsend for preserving weapon durability and quickly dispatching zombies in general. It's a huge upgrade that completely changes how you approach combat encounters. And there's also a ground pound and some grapple abilities, but I never use those much at all. Now, fighting zombies in this game feels good and is properly brutal, and these shitty shamblers can take a lot of punishment, which makes taking out hordes of zombies pretty dangerous and difficult to do. It's not very advisable, and it makes the parkour much more appealing, as you'll mostly want to run around groups of zombies instead of fighting them, as it's a great way to destroy your weapon durability, and you'll probably lose several hit points in the process, forcing you to burn a medkit or two, as these rotting and stinky walking corpses are more tenacious than you'd expect. They're pretty grabby and can do huge damage when having a Christmas feast on Kyle's left breast, but at least the first zombie bite is the only one that counts. They're also relentless in their pursuit of you, as even if you smack them hard with your weapon as they're coming at you, the zombies will use their physical forward momentum to keep pressing the attack towards you, which often results in more grabbing and Kyle Crane booby feasting, and the zombies are never not a solid threat to deal with. And combat is also stamina based, so you can't just swing wildly at zombies until they're all dead. Instead, you have to carefully manage your orange stamina bar, as if you swing too much, you'll be left winded and only able to do a clumsy and slow downward swing. So be mindful of your stamina and approach it the same way you'd approach a Souls-esque game, I suppose. But luckily, there's a dodge move that we can unlock which will have Kyle sliding across the ground like he's on skates or something. And this dodge costs no stamina. It can even be used when you're out of stamina. So don't be afraid to spam dodge to stay alive and to space out zombies. And this also extends to fighting the special infected variants, which is all mostly fine. My only issues are the aforementioned bomber sneak attacks, and when fighting goons on hard or in the late game, there is complete oceans of health with slightly too large of hitboxes, and the game gives you no time to go in for an attack and then dodge out of the way before the goon uses the shockwave from slamming his rebar club to knock Crane 8 feet away for almost no damage. However, The biggest issue with zombie combat I found is in hard mode, and that is just the endless viral spam. The virals are zombies that are supposed to be recently turned survivors, so they're faster and stronger than the average shambling biter, and they can climb most any building like Crane, and even have these awesome details where when damaged, they'll revert back to being almost human, crying out and holding their arms out as they brace for Kyle to smash them across the face with a rusty pipe, which is just an awesomely bleak detail that I think more zombie games should try and explore. Like, where does the human end, and where does the monster begin? The virals spawn in when the player makes a loud noise, and it makes sense on paper, as using loud and powerful weapons like guns or causing massive explosions comes with the trade-off of raging, pissed-off virals swarming your booty butt cheeks. But on hard mode, the game just decides that doing any sort of combat counts as a loud noise, so when you try to fight a zombie or two to try and raise your combat XP, you'll immediately have 2 to 3 virals gunning for your ass, and they can easily combo your ass to death with their flurries of punches, so you're forced to disengage, deal with them, likely heal, and then get back to what you were doing until more spawn in. And it's pretty annoying, and it interrupts the flow of the gameplay, and it's just not very difficult in any interesting way. It just feels like spam, and it's also really fucking annoying with how often the virals holler and scream their heads off, especially the female ones. They holler like a tiger caught by his toes. And there was so much viral spam, I even developed an efficient strategy to quickly kill them, and I call it viral whack-a-mole, where when 2 to 5 virals inevitably show up to try and pull your rectum out of your anus after you dare smack a zombie in the face with a hammer, or if you just sneeze too loudly or something. Just disengage, get to higher ground, like a short wall or on top of a truck or a building or whatever is nearby, and just wait for the virals to chase you, and as they climb up to you, just spam E to stomp them as they reach the ledge that you're on, like you're playing whack-a-mole. And I found this to be by far the best way to handle any viral spam. But I eventually just reverted back to normal difficulty because the spam was just really that annoying, and I didn't want to have to keep constantly dealing with it. However, the worst of the combat comes from the human versus human combat, when you have to deal with Rise's thugs. I wouldn't say that the AI is straight up horrible, I mean, it could always be worse, but it's trying to do way too much, and it ends up being incredibly unsatisfying and annoying to deal with. Human enemies attack with melee weapons, they can throw knives at you, and they can also dodge and block your attacks. And actually hitting a human enemy is a total crapshoot, as you just have to swing at them and hope that the game allows you to land a hit. Because if the game decides that the human is going to block or dodge your attack, there's nothing you can do to hit the enemy temporarily. They'll just block or dodge each attack, and there's no clear telegraph that they're actually going to block. It just feels like each swing comes with RNG, like I'm playing Morrowind or something, but with actual physics. It's just not great. And the shooting enemies are worse, as they can just melt you with bullets, forcing you to shoot back to even have a chance. Or the game just becomes the world's most mediocre first-person shooter, until all the gun-toting enemies are dead, and we can all go back to the normal combat. And there are unfortunately some developer-mandated shooting stretches for the main story. But if I could, anytime I saw human enemies, I knew the melee combat would not be worth it. So I just opted to shoot the human enemies any chance I got, and to deal with the virals later as a punishment for the OP weapon use. Also, this game just loves its random explosions, as Haran is full of explosive propane tanks and fire extinguishers, and there were a few times where I was fighting zombies, and I failed to notice a nearby explosive container, accidentally whacked it, and then blew myself up and died in one hit. So always be on the lookout for red containers, and of course those bomber bastards who can spawn in at any time. But with combat out of the way, let's talk about the night mechanics, as the night and the dying of the light is the main gimmick of the entire game, and despite being the main feature of the Haran virus, it's a bit surprising how avoidable and unessential the nights are. I believe that the main story forces you to work in the night only like twice, once to escape the volatiles after burning the antizin, and one other time when we needed to get a bolter tissue sample for Dr. Zero. Otherwise, all the story missions could be done at pretty much any time of the day, and the nighttime mostly becomes a side thing, and I can best describe it as a sort of optional hard mode. The game has a full day-night cycle with some really great looking lighting effects, and at night, all XP is doubled for parkour and combat, and the main activities to do here are to kill bolters for their tissue samples, and avoid the volatiles and powered up virals called the Nightwalkers in pursuits, which starts when a volatile or a Nightwalker spots you, and your goal is to either escape the chase by running to a safe zone, or getting away from the Night Freaks. But that's about it. Well, I mean, you can also challenge yourself to see how long you can last at night and how much XP you can rack up in a single pursuit before you get fisted so deeply by a volatile its hand is coming out your mouth. And it's great for grinding out levels quickly, and it's pretty intense and difficult when the night zombies actually start coming after you. It's genuinely hard and oppressive feeling when the sun goes down. But also, it's more or less completely optional, and there's no true night exclusive activities like in Dying Light 2 and beyond. There's some night challenges and bolter spawn camping, and that's about it. It's surprisingly de-emphasized in a game that's literally called Dying Light. Finally, Dying Light is full of plenty of side quests and side activities like challenges, random encounters, and quarantine zones. The side quests here are all pretty simple, and they all usually involve going to a location to grab something, to flip a valve or an electric switch, to kill a certain zombie, or to collect a few items. So the side quests here are usually make or break depending on the premise of the quest, leaving some forgettable ones like Fountain or Voltage, where we just flip some switches to restore some water and power, which is not super riveting. But there's still plenty of actually memorable quests, like the classic quest to get some seizure meds from this mentally unique man-child named Ghazi, who despite living through a zombie apocalypse, only cares about getting chocolates and a movie for his mother. And when we get him the goods, we learn that Ghazi's mom is not a human, but is rather a stack of pillows in the shape of a human with a bucket for a head. And Ghazi is now perfectly content to watch empty static on his screen. It's pretty funny, but also pretty unsettling, and this one has always stuck with me for years. And there's other interesting ones like the Legless Spider, where we meet an injured runner who's looking to deliver hookah rig parts to some guy, but then we learn that this guy thinks that the Haran virus started thanks to a meteorite impact sent by aliens.
I'll load the shards into the accelerator chamber, and we'll be ready to take the fight to the reptilians.
Whoa, wait, whoa. Who are we taking the fight to?
Okay, technically they're gadoids from Orion, but reptilians is a recognized euphemism, even if it's a bit redneck.
Which then has Crane picking up meteorite chunks to complete the quest. Or what about this quest where we make the ill-advised move of giving this shifty guy in the tower a pistol so he can take his son somewhere in the quarantine zone? I don't know. Seems legit. What could go wrong? And when you give the guy a pistol, you learn from his wife that he fled the slums and then reappeared in Sector 0. Except he got bitten and is now zombified. So we gotta put him down. And then we find his poor son hiding in a closet. And we radio Troy to come scoop him up and give him some TLC. But I can't help but feel responsible for this mess. Man, poor kid. And I also really liked all the quests involving the Magic Fortress Kindergarten, as those were all extremely compelling and deeply sad for me. Like having to find insulin, or a quote, health potion, for a poor diabetic girl, where you have to find her slaughtered father and search through the ruins of this family's life to save this poor girl. And the guy helping the kids, Rupert the Gunsmith, pretends to be a wizard and introduces Crane as a heroic fantasy knight to the kids to help keep them ignorant of the horrible zombie apocalypse reality that they live in. There's also the finishing touch of Rupert revealing that his beloved wife was dead the whole time and is zombified in the basement, and he wasn't strong enough to kill his zombified wife, so we give her the rest she needs ourselves, and it just fits into the overall theme of Dying Light 1 perfectly. And there's still plenty of other quests, like the ones with the dynamic Tism duo of Tolga and Fatine, who have become sort of running joke characters in the whole Dying Light series, along with plenty of other solid side quests to keep you busy that I can't go into full detail here. It's some solid side shit all in all, and there's plenty of side quests to take on here. I still haven't done them all yet. You also run into encounters where you may need to help survivors fend off zombies, escort them to safety, or capture a supply drop from a squad of Rise's thugs. And they're all fine little encounters that you can get some survivor point boosts from, but I don't think I've ever been once able to save the survivors who try to fight the Demolishers. They just have suicidal AI and get smashed and chucked around like toys. Finally, there's these quarantine zones that you can enter, where you have to complete a given objective, such as grabbing 5 supply drops, or covering zombie manhole spawners, or what have you, all the while fighting off zombies and looting GRE chests full of strong weapons. And they're alright activities. They're mostly there for grinding survivor points and farming weapons, and beyond that, they're mostly forgettable. And while exploring, you'll run into plenty of locked trucks and chests, and you can raid police vehicles for weapons and upgrade mods, you can crack open medical trucks for gauze and health kits, and you can open up plenty of other containers for various crafting supplies and valuables that you can sell for cash to buy even more weapons and supplies. And to unlock these containers and cars, you gotta play a lockpicking minigame that's literally ripped bar for bar from Skyrim, which is fine, but it gets a little tedious when you play the same minigame over and over and over and over again, all for some likely mid as fuck rewards. And I barely mentioned the crafting system because there really isn't much to write home about. Just gather gauze and alcohol from medkits, metal parts for repairs and lockpicks, and the rest is mostly fluff to build weapon mods or throwing weapons, all of which are helpful and fun, but are not at all required to succeed in Dying Light. And finally, there's some pretty sick Easter eggs to find, like this Mario Easter egg where if you interact with this small pipe in a chimney, you'll be teleported to a room where you play a classic Mario level from the first person, and all the Goombas are just zombies with an untextured mushroom shape on them. Absolutely sensational. There's also a Plants vs. Zombies Easter egg, a pretty insane chicken one in the following.
You got inside! Yes! Hello! Hello! Doctor.
Master Sword, toy swords, fucking Left 4 Bread, and plenty more. The devs must have an absolute blast making these. But overall, despite some undeniable flaws like the crusty as all hell human combat, the lackluster shooting segments, de-emphasized night mechanics, fairly weak villains, ridiculous viral spam, and health sponge enemies on higher difficulties, Dying Light is still a really great game, and I still really enjoyed playing this in 2025, almost as much as I did in 2016. The parkour still feels fun and satisfying, and makes traversing these dense game worlds a pretty great time. The combat is brutal, physical, and mostly really fun. When not fighting humans, that is. And drop-kicking and bashing zombie heads still hasn't gotten old for me. And changing up how you approach the combat as you get more efficient at killing through level ups and skill unlocks is still super satisfying and fun. And it's a whole new game once you get the drop-kick and stomp attacks, and the game rewards you for using these mechanics with some easy and fun to pull off kills. Plus, there's a great amount of weapon variety and customization options to dish death in insane ways, like lighting a zombie on fire and then knocking it off a building with a flaming sword, which makes battling the undead always a great time. And the story has a fantastic premise and setting, in a bleak, brutal, yet irreverent, and sometimes even hopeful tone that ends up in a great harmony and balances absolutely devastating moments with genuinely weird or just straight up wacky shit, but it still all works in one cohesive experience. And overall, this is still one of my comfort games, and probably one of, if not my favorite zombie game ever. Flaws and all. But that's not all there is to Dying Light. As sure, there's DLCs like the Bozak Horde and all the multiplayer modes like Be the Zombie. But I never really played the multiplayer modes, and I'd be surprised if there was even anyone in these lobbies. And as for the Bozak Horde, it's more of a side time trial and challenge mode that I'll skip for now for the sake of time, and for the sake of I didn't play it. But check out this absolutely insane Bozak final boss fight. The DLC might be worth it for this fight alone.
My last combatant wouldn't fight after I lopped off his arm. Too easy.
Don't worry, Bozak. You're gonna get the fight you've earned.
That's the spirit. Now, fight me!
But no. Instead, let's take a look at the main expansion for Dying Light, The Following, which almost feels like Dying Light 1.5 for the huge amount of quests, new open world, and driving mechanics. So let's jump right into it. To launch The Following, we gotta make a new game for it, and when we start it up, we get a Frankenstein quote that won't make sense till the end of the story, and we see Crane and Dr. Lena looking over an injured guy, who seems to have gone completely stark raving mad, claiming that he encountered zombies that don't attack people, and survivors who don't get infected, even after being bitten, out in the Haran countryside. He even has a map on him that seems to show how to get to the countryside and out of Haran itself. In-game, it's been a few weeks since the end of the main story for base Dying Light, and despite Camden's optimism about finding a cure at the end of the story, it seems progress has completely stalled out on that end, and the tower survivors are running extremely low on antizin. So with this map and a lead about survivors in the countryside who are seemingly immune to the Haran virus, it seems that Kyle Crane has no choice but to head out there and to see what's going on, and to hopefully come back with a cure to save the tower. So we take a short trip out of the sewers and find ourselves in the open and poppin'-filled lush Haran countryside, and it seems like that raving guy was right. The root was real, and we now have to get our bearings and make contact with some survivors to see what's going on here. And we soon reach the survivor camp and meet the local leader, a man named Jasir, and his goth daughter Ezgi. And I did not expect to find gothas in a place like this, but it's a surprise I'll gladly welcome. However, Jasir and the survivors are extremely cold and dismissive of Crane, and they tell him to take some food and GTF out of here.
Take some bread, my friend, and go back to Haran. No one wants you here.
However, we meet a sleazy trader at the settlement who says he worked with the guy who told us about the countryside in the first place. And the trader, his name is Khan by the way, tells us that yes, the survivors don't seem to turn even when bitten, but that they're also all in a cult, and they worship a figure only known as the Mother. And we can see her painted on a wall here in the camp. But before we get more info on that, Khan has us go get some wheels, and after clearing a farmstead of bandits, we can jack this sweet buggy and drive it on back to Jasir's camp. This buggy being the Following's main new mechanic, which I'll discuss in detail later, as thanks to the new massive open countryside map, a car is the best way to get around, as parkour is extremely de-emphasized out here. We returned to Jasir's farmstead, but Khan had left while we were away, so we instead talked to that goth girl Ezgi to try and figure out a way to get the survivors here to not treat us like a lost mangy dog with rabies or something. And Ezgi tells us that their water supply has gone bad, and everyone they sent to the nearby water treatment plant hasn't returned. So here's our opportunity to ingratiate ourselves with the survivors. So we head on over to the water treatment plant and kill all the bandits holding the water hostage, and we get the water treatment plant back up and running normally. And Jasir finally treats us normally in turn. So we ask him about how the survivors here don't turn without any antizin, and Jasir credits their immunity to his faith in the Mother. So we ask him if he can get us in contact with the zombie mommy herself, but he says that she only speaks to her most loyal acolytes called the Faceless, and they're called that because they wear sun masks, you see. So to get in contact with the Faceless and subsequently the Mother, we have to do quests for and help out the survivors to increase our trust level with them and their cult. And this is where the game opens up for you to complete side quests and activities to increase your trust levels with the cult, such as getting the Haran Dam power plant back up and running, where we meet one of the Faceless and get to see his zombie pacification powers in action. He's reciting this creepy as all fuck prayer to the Mother as he burns what appears to be incense.
Mother is good. Mother is life. Mother will help us.
And there also appears to be this blue aura hanging in the air nearby, but whatever he's doing, it seems to be working, and all the nearby zombies are all completely passive. However, later in the quest, it seems like the Faceless prayers stopped working, and he was mauled to death by zombies, as indicated by his bloody corpse that we find. I'm not sure how that happened, but the mystery deepens. And we keep on doing side quests and leveling up trust until we're contacted by a Faceless, who invites us to attend a religious gathering at this mountainside monument. And we arrive and see plenty of worshippers praying. Even that con dude is here drinking the Kool-Aid now, it seems. And the Faceless walk out with all these incense burner things, and the zombies near them again seem completely pacified. And the Mother herself then makes an appearance, and Crane is then taken on stage, where he then hears the Mother's voice speaking directly to him in his head somehow. And the Mother says that she believes in Kyle.
This can't be happening. Can't be.
Believe in me, Kyle, as I believe in you.
Before we pass out and wake up and find everybody gone. Later on, we're asked by the Faceless to investigate some, quote, anomalous activity in the fields. And when we arrive, we find a huge cloud of that blue gas and a docile demolisher just chilling in this blue fart cloud, surrounded by some empty military crates. And later on after that, we meet a Faceless at Jasir's farm, and the Faceless comes clean with what we probably already know by now. There's no magic prayer healing going on here, and that blue gas that keeps showing up is some sort of experimental medicine, or an elixir as they call it, that makes all the zombies non-aggressive and somehow keeps people from turning even when bitten, but it's still not a full cure according to them. And he says that they're running low on this stuff, so we ask Crane to go find some more, and if he does, he'll let us keep some of that blue fart gas as a souvenir. So we head out to a cave, and inside we find a military convoy that was transporting the blue gas, but now it's all gone, as it seems some of Rise's men somehow caught wind of all this and came out to the countryside too. Great. We're then tasked with heading to a mansion to help out an old scholar named Attila, who apparently was given a very important mission by the Mother herself, and he requests that we investigate 4 old cult monuments for him. And after taking a look at all of them, we get a good idea of what's going on here. The name of the cult is the Children of the Sun, and this cult has had historical ties to the Haran countryside for centuries, and the Mother is actually co-opting this old cult for her own purposes, presenting herself as their ancient prophet, also called the Mother. And according to Attila, the cult had an ancient prophecy that went something like, "When the world is ravaged by plague." Wow, that's topical. "And when humanity is struck by corruption of both flesh and soul, a worthy man will make the ultimate sacrifice and will accept the mercy of light, which shall reveal the God of the sun, who will cleanse the land." Yeah, cult type shit. I can get behind this. Once we hear the prophecy, Attila then says he needs to finish up his work and will let us know when he's done. And when he recontacts us, we return to find a note from Attila, who reveals that the Mother is actually a woman named Jasmine, who was married to a Haran colonel who was overseeing an unknown project here. But it involved the blue pacification gas and the virus itself. And of course, the HV outbreak occurs, and the colonel died after being chomped on by a zombie while trying to evacuate his wife, Jasmine. Attila then says the colonel gave him something to give to Jasmine, but he never saw her again after the initial outbreak, so he leaves a mysterious code with Crane instead. And we find Attila's dead body in a cave under the mansion that he was in, after he had donned a red mask we found, and he ended up slitting his own throat in some deranged ritual to try and invoke the cult's prophecy early. Bro really thought he was the main character. Sorry, man. Prophecies are for protagonists only. We then head out and save a Faceless from some Rise goons at a grain mill, but he's been tortured and is near death. And with his dying words, he tells us to head to the lighthouse. And when we arrive, we're attacked by, oh shit, Khan. I low-key forgot about this dude, and it's revealed that he was working with Rise's bandits, and he was the one who stole the blue gas from the military convoy originally. And we learn that the bandits are planning to attack the dam, where the cult's main base is located. So we drive our asses over there under heavy gunfire and even rocket launcher attacks, but we make it to the dam regardless, and find a complete bloodbath. Corpses of Rise's goons and cultists strewn everywhere. We then enter the dam, and the Mother then telepathically speaks to Kyle again, where she clarifies everything we've learned. She reveals that her husband died in her arms, but before he bit the big one, he gave her a cigarette case. But her husband didn't smoke, and it turns out the case actually held a map and a key, which led to the dam, which was being used by the military as a secret installation that held the blue zombie pacifying gas. And we then finally confront the mother, who takes off her mask to reveal that she's actually a horrifying intelligent volatile, as we can see by her split lower jaw and loose waggling tongue down there. Even Kyle is pissing his pants at just the sight of her.
Lifting the fumes is one thing. Unfolding you could possibly imagine.
And she reveals that the blue gas substance isn't a cure, nor is it a suppressant, but rather a secret third thing, and it slowly turns those in contact with it into sentient volatiles, who during the day have their human intelligence and even some sweet telepathy powers. But at night, they revert to their base animalistic volatile instincts and become ravenous killing machines again. She then reveals that she believes that Kyle Crane is the man the old cult prophecy mentions, and he will make the ultimate sacrifice and channel the god of the sun to cleanse the land. And Kyle tries to plead with her to give him the medicine and let him go, as Dr. Lena has told us through extremely spotty radio chatter that supplies are gone and people are turning. Shit's looking real grim. But the mother says that all the blue gas will do will turn people into volatiles like her. And she tells Kyle that he's already turning into a volatile himself after huffing those fumes for the whole DLC. And she then forces us to make a choice. Either sacrifice ourselves to destroy the virus, or defy her and try to take the blue gas vials and leave. And if you sacrifice yourself, you'll discover that the god of the sun is all too real, and there's a nuke held at the damn facility, a failsafe to destroy the countryside if the virus broke containment and spread. And Kyle and the mother both get atomized by nuclear hellfire. So yeah, that ending kinda sucks. But if you refuse her, she will force Crane to drink the blue elixir, and now he's gonna go volatile too. That is, if the mother doesn't pulverize him into a fine red paste first, and we start a boss battle with her, which thankfully is not just a QTE, and it's actually a pretty solid fight with several phases. The mother first starts by attacking like a viral who could spawn clones of herself to continuously attack you, with multiple clones appearing to all attack at once, and use the terrain to stay away from them here. And when it seems like Kyle's about to be overwhelmed, he starts to unleash his inner volatile beast, and we can start killing the mother clones with only a single punch, until the mother's final glowing form appears. And we then have a volatile versus volatile fistfight to the death, the mother using this annoying teleporting scream power to do some serious damage to you. But Crane overpowers Jasmine and literally rips her goddamn head off with his bare hands to end her for good. We won, but Kyle is completely gassed from his fight, deliriously saying that he'll bring the medicine back over the radio as he stumbles out of the dam, and we soon find ourselves exiting to the unaffected parts of Haran, seeing a family playing at a playground. But unfortunately for these kids, the sun is setting, and Kyle sees himself with glowing, meaty, volatile hands, and the family cowers as the screen cuts to black, and our protagonist lets out a demonic, volatile scream. As he assumedly murders these poor children and tears his family to shreds, as the following comes to a close, which as we know now, isn't even close to the end of Kyle Crane's story. But before the Beast was announced, this was an extremely bleak ending for Dying Light 1, and Crane's fate was uncertain for a decade. He was either an evil monster running around killing children, or he was a small pile of carbonized ash. But overall, the following is a simple, but fairly solid DLC story. I think the Mother is by far the most interesting villain in all of Dying Light 1, and her existence as a sentient volatile makes for an interesting setup, as she's part monster, but also wants to sacrifice herself and to blow up the entire Haran area in nuclear fire, just to save the world from the virus and herself, giving her character some much needed complexity. But besides the final choice and reveal, the story is mostly just fine. It's pretty obvious that the blue gas is the magic cure from pretty early on, which does dampen the reveal of the mystery a bit. Also, this DLC completely negates any sense of accomplishment, progress, and even hope from the main story, as despite everything we did, it was all for naught in the end. Camden couldn't find a cure, the tower survivors likely all died from lack of supplies and antizin, and Kyle gets turned into a half volatile, and later gets captured and subsequently tortured for 13 years by some asshole British guy, leaving the tower survivors to die a slow and agonizing death in the quarantine zone, with seemingly only Spike making it out alive. And it sort of just condemns the main story's characters to a horrifically cruel fate, which never really sat right with me. But it is what it is. And besides the main story, the following is also jam-packed with plenty of new interesting side quests and its surprisingly large new open-world countryside. Some highlights include clearing out the new night-exclusive volatile nests, which are caves you have to enter and kill all the, incubating, I guess, volatiles, while fighting off viral hordes in the cave and then escaping. And although it's a pretty simple activity, it gives you more things to do at night, which is a very welcome addition. Plus, the volatile caves full of human gore piles and the incubating volatiles look amazingly nasty and freaky. It's like watching an alien take a shit. There's also a side quest to find a missing herbologist guy named Sabit. and you find that his house is right on top of a volatile nest cave, and inside the cave we find Sabit alright, but he's half metamorphosized into a volatile, stuck to the ground with guts and other unknown viscera on some ungodly breeding ground. But he can't fully transform into one, as sunlight is beaming right on him from a small hole in the cave ceiling, leaving him still able to talk somehow, but he's in pure agony, and he pleads with us to kill him. And I have no idea how this happened or how volatiles more or less grow out of gore piles, but it adds so much mystery and horror to the volatiles and their lore, and I absolutely love it. Rabies very at my ass. This virus is making humans transform into beasts by having them pupate out of a gore pile. What the fuck? We can also do a quest to find a mail package for a boy from his likely now dead mother, help keep the water supply clean, get tricked by a boy on a radio who lures us into almost getting killed by a demolisher, where we learn that a group of asshole kids were luring people to their deaths to steal their belongings. We can then run into those chuckle fucks Tolga and Fatine again and do a whole quest line for them. They tried to escape Haran in a plane, but they crashed in the countryside. Classic. And we can even investigate strange noises in a cave and discover that it's a zombified child living in a makeshift cave home. And we soon discover that the zombie boy's father was injured by hunters who thought he was an animal, which left him unable to reach his son, who died and turned into a screamer infected, scared and alone in his cave home, which is absolutely devastating. And so many more quests to do that I'd be here all day if I went over them all in detail. But bottom line, there's a great and wide range of quests to do all over the countryside. And finally, there's these freaks of nature boss fights, which are supersized versions of special infected that you can take down in some optional boss fights. But a 10-foot tall, green as algae zombie toad ain't nothing compared to the pole, which more or less completely trivializes these fights, as long as you have enough ammo. And also, moving on to the buggy, it's a pretty great new mechanic. The buggy handles well and feels pretty good to drive, and it can really rip down these country roads when at full power. And the countryside map is pretty damn large, so having a car is pretty essential for traversal, as parkour is mostly completely useless for like 80% of the map. And the buggy here replaces parkour as the main form of travel in the following. You can reset the buggy's position by holding V, and it can also be recalled to any available location by interacting with the recall radio, which are great tools for when you eventually drown your buggy or get it stuck on some geometry. And there's now also a whole new skill tree just for driving, which you level up by making big turns, doing driving challenges, going over jumps, and smashing into zombies and destroyable objects like wood fences. And I think this may be the first driving game I've seen where you purposely crash into things to level up your driving skill. And driving skill level ups and unlocks will allow you to create new buggy mods like nitro boosts, protective cages, fuel efficiency, flamethrowers, ramming bars, and car parts up to level 5 and more, as the buggy has 5 main components that can degrade in quality from use, like how weapons degrade, and they are the suspension, the brakes, the traction, the turbo, and the engine, which are all mostly repaired with new car items like screws, which can be looted out from under car hoods or looted from new boxes that are labeled sightless. And it's not too annoying to fix up the buggy when you need to, and the upgrades and mods are nice to have, but again, they're unessential, and I didn't really bother with the driving challenges, so my driver level never even got close to the max level to be able to take advantage of all these skills and mods anyway. Also, the map can feel a little too big at times, which can make driving between places you've already been to plenty of times a bit of a drag, along with the surprisingly cliff-saturated southern part of the map, making driving feel like a bit of a hike to get up and around all these rivers and cliffs. It turns driving into a bit of a snooze fest at times. Like the drive back to Jasir's camp is so boring, might have to play Subway Surfers in my other hand or something. But overall, the following introduces a surprisingly solid and fun to control car to the game pretty seamlessly, and has a pretty robust amount of mods and upgrades to make it the ultimate apocalypse whip, and it's always a good time to blast zombies over your windshield. But at the end of the day, with everything considered, the following is a very, very solid DLC that provides several more hours of Dying Light goodness in a fresh new open world setting. And the story, although basic and pretty short, it's also pretty fascinating and extremely brutal in how it ends. The mother being a telepathic sentient volatile sounds pretty bananas on paper, but actually ends up working pretty well in execution, expanding on the mystery and potential of the Haran virus without completely jumping the shark on the original concept of Dying Light. And the story actually does a good job of making you sympathize and understand the mother, a poor woman who became this intelligent monster, cursed to be beloved by day and a raging beast by night. And her plan to nuke the whole of Haran was ultimately, probably, the right choice. But it wasn't meant to be, as there was still a beast waiting to be unleashed. And my only real complaints with the story are its rush shoehorning in of Rise's men, and the fact that the tower and all its characters seemingly all die off screen. But besides these issues, the story here is overall interesting and strange, but in a good way. And this is all on top of solid driving mechanics with deep skill trees and customization options, as well as a pretty damn huge map and a still solidly good looking DLC world, and a great selection of side quests and activities to just keep the Dying Light experience rolling, along with cool new weapons I haven't mentioned yet like handsaws, scythes, new weapons like the SMGs, and if you enjoyed Dying Light, The following is a no-brainer to play and get several more hours of fun out of. But with that, that's all I got for the OG Dying Light, so let's leave it behind and take a look at its more controversial sequel, Dying Light 2. Dying Light 2 is, unfortunately, often defined not by what it is, but rather by what it isn't. Dying Light 2's development took a grueling 7+ years to complete, with Dying Light 1 releasing in January of 2015, and Dying Light 2 not releasing until February of 2022. And Dying Light 2 was a much different game in its development versus its release, and this in-depth version was looking to be my goddamn dream game. You take the excellent combat and parkour of Dying Light, refine it to make it even more robust and fun, give us a much larger and taller city to run around and climb in, and then bring on Chris Avellone as your lead writer and creative director, the legendary game designer and writer who is one of the main creatives behind Fallout 2 and New Vegas, which are two of my favorite games of all time. With their E3 presentations claiming that Dying Light 2 will be all about player choice and consequences, as the world will evolve and respond to your actions, with seemingly hundreds of possible combinations of outcomes and game possibilities. It seemed perfect. It's like if you asked me to describe my dream zombie game, Dying Light mechanics with Fallout-esque world building, writing, and player choice options, like I'm already sold hook, line, and sinker. I'm taking the bait. I'm a fat fucking carp completely mesmerized by this proverbial juicy-ass worm of a game. However, it wasn't meant to be, as God is dead and Satan rules this earth and we can never have good things ever. And Dying Light 2 ended up getting caught in a brutal development hell, and Chris Avellone was let go by Techland during development after some public allegations came out about it, where two women accused him of using his status to commit sexual misconduct at conventions. I'm not really sure what exactly he did. The allegations are vague at best here, but I guess Techland didn't want to go anywhere near that kind of trouble at the time, and they parted ways with him. However, by mid-2021, it seems that Avellone has fully exonerated himself from these allegations. He denied them in a public Medium article, and he filed a libel suit against his accusers, which was then later settled for an unknown sum. And Wikipedia says it was a, quote, 7-figure payment, with the accusers retracting their original claims. So it seems like Chris Avellone and Dying Light 2 both suffered tremendously and had several years of work upended and thrown out over what I guess is game convention drama and slander? Great. Fuck this nothing world. But we can't change the past, and with Avellone gone, Techland had to seriously overhaul and cut back on his original plans for the game, which resulted in so much content being cut. There's a 230-page document going over all the cut content, whole factions, story missions, quests, dialogue, and even a whole area of the map with more Gothic-styled architecture called Elysium was all scrapped. And if you go back and look at the old E3 trailers, the architecture is just completely different from the final product too. And the player choices and world effect trees were greatly reduced in scope. But in my opinion, it's important to understand the context behind this game's fraught development and its consequences. But it's also not fair to judge Dying Light 2 by what it isn't, / what it could have been. So we have to take what we got. So let's see if, despite the cuts and development woes, if Dying Light 2 is still a worthwhile gaming experience in the big old 2026. From the opening cinematic, we get a rundown on all that's happened since the end of Dying Light 1. We learn that the GRE did eventually find a cure for the Haran virus and distributed it worldwide, seemingly ending the zombie threat on Earth. However, the GRE and other scientists just couldn't help themselves, and they kept experimenting on and modifying the Haran virus in secret, eventually making a newer, deadlier version of it called THV. But all those GRE scientists must have been on way too much THC, as of course, something went wrong, and the THV virus somehow broke out of lab containment, and it quickly spread all over the world, causing the rapid collapse of civilization around 2021. And it's fucking bad. Like, look at this picture. The world is so chaotic and is collapsing so fast, the goddamn newspaper this guy is reading caught on fire as he was reading it. But this is what I was saying in the Dying Light 1 story review though. This is why you don't try to make a fucking weapon out of a goddamn zombie virus. The weapon will make more weapons out of people, who will eventually turn back on you. And this fall and worldwide zombie plague sent humanity back to the Dark Ages more or less, leaving survivors to band together in fortified and isolated settlements and cities to survive, with little contact between survivors, save for messages and packages carried by pilgrims, who are nomadic messengers and porters who brave the wilderness and zombie shamblers that wander the destroyed world, traveling from settlement to settlement where nobody really trusts them. Think of them as kind of like zombie apocalypse versions of Death Stranding porters or something. And we are one of those pilgrims, a man named Aiden, and he's about to change the Dying Light world forever. We hear Aiden give a quick voiceover to explain himself and the setting of Dying Light 2. It's the year 2035, about 15 years after the Haran virus went worldwide, and he's a zombie apocalypse mailman, and he says he's being sent to Villa Dor, also known as the City, or the last bastion of humanity, a city with enough living people to still have some semblance of society and civilization, in search of information about his lost sister named Mia. And we open with Aiden escaping some virals on a collapsed road, where he's then met by Spike, the quartermaster trap engineer guy from Dying Light 1, who honestly sounds a lot different in this game.
Rise and his boys only operate during the day because going out after dark is a dandy way to get killed.
Quit pretending. You became a pilgrim to track that fucker down. Waltz, I found someone who knows him.
And he somehow made it out of Haran, and now works as a pilgrim like Aiden, acting like a sort of mentor to him. And he teaches us how to craft medkits, which has gone from gauze and booze to now just using chamomile and honey looted right out of a bee's nest. And I'm not sure how good that stuff is at sealing up wounds, but whatever. And Spike then leads us to a large mansion, which has the remnants of a Jonestown-esque end-of-the-world party where everyone took pills and died at the end to avoid living on a zombie-infested planet. And it's a great little tone setter that picks up right where Dying Light 1 left off. We then share some 15-year-old beer with Spike, who then says he got in contact with somebody who may know where Mia is, and he's currently hiding out in Villador, the last city on Earth with a sizable surviving population, apparently. And he tells us that we can get in contact with the guy at a nearby radio tower. And he says that he works for a guy named Waltz, who Aiden is all too familiar with, it seems. So we part ways with Spike, and shack up in a house near the antenna, and turn in for the night. And we then have a dream that shows us Aiden's backstory. As a child, Aiden was being held in some kind of medical facility, and we're woken up by this little girl, Mia, who is Aiden Babaden's here sister, and his only friend in the entire world. She wants Aiden to run away with her, but then a lab guard shows up and takes the two to a room full of scared-looking bald children, and Mia and Aiden snuggle up and promise to never abandon each other. But then Aiden is taken to be experimented on by Dr. Waltz, who injects bald Aiden with some kind of unknown serum. But later, a fire breaks out in the lab, and Aiden manages to escape, but he loses Mia in the fire, and he hasn't seen her since that day, and he's been trotting around this dead world ever since in search of her. And also, Aiden's memory of his childhood is also, conveniently, lost and fragmented, so we only know about what we see. And anyway, we make contact with the contact, who reminds us of what we just saw, as he works for Waltz himself, and he says that Waltz's experiments on Aiden made him harder, better, faster, and stronger than the average human, which based on how high Aiden can jump, makes total sense. This white boy's got some moon jumps. He tells us that Villador is completely walled off, but he points us towards an access tunnel that we can take to get inside, so we head right on over. And Aiden makes his way through an old subway tunnel, but then gets attacked by a volatile, who manages to bite Aiden on the arm, kind of like how Kyle Craniacs got his forearm feasted on too. And Aiden hadn't been bitten up until this point, so his days as a pilgrim are now more or less over. But our contact shows up and scares the volatile off with some UV light, and Aiden then passes out, but when we wake up, we find our contact being attacked by the Renegades, the bandit faction of Villador who kind of talk like fantasy goblins or something.
Let him go.
You're gonna make us let him go, punk? I'd sure like to see you do that.
Which is probably a side effect of their advanced THV. I mean, their veins are all black and tense, and they look like zombie drug addicts. And we kill these thugs with some refined human combat, and we tend to our contact, who then hands us a GRE access key, an extremely useful tool that can open up GRE crates and other doors, along with some other usages that'll be important later. But he says that Waltz cannot be allowed to get his hands on the key, and he tells us to head to a place called the Fisheye, and to get in contact with one of his allies there, or else Waltz will use the key to somehow destroy all of Villador. So we kill more goons before Waltz himself shows up. So we pull a Batman Arkham and hide in a vent with a GRE key, and we watch our informant get confronted and killed by Waltz, with Waltz himself looking like some kind of evil zombie vampire dude. And his voice acting is just kinda... it's not great.
This is the end. I'm sorry. Not really. You're only dying. Before 0 hour, my grandfather raised horses.
And he brutally guts his former employee. But just then, Aiden's volatile bite starts causing him to scream out in agony, alerting Waltz to his vent hiding spot. So we bug out through the tunnels and barely escape, until we make it back topside in some kind of survivor market. But the survivors start freaking out about us not having a biomarker, which are those high-tech looking wristband things. And Aiden is having more volatile seizures. So the survivors are all losing their minds and they want to immediately hang Aiden, until we're saved by some charming guy named Hakon, who carries us away to his house, and he gives us an injection. But ultimately, he saves Aiden, who is prevented from turning for now. And when we wake up, Aiden says that he needs to make it to the fisheye. And I've always loved this little animation where Hakon opens Aiden's eye. I always thought it was so smooth. But Hakon says that we can't make it to the fisheye unless we get a biomarker. And what's a biomarker, you may ask? And what happened to Anazin? Well, the new THV virus works a little bit differently to the old Haran virus. Instead of the virus just incubating in your body and giving you seizures until you turn into a biter, which is suppressed with antizin, THV infected people will now turn into biters if they're simply in a dark area for only a few minutes at most. But being in direct sunlight or UV light will cause the virus to retreat and your immunity countdown to reset. So the biomarker here is to show how close the virus is to taking over your body and killing you. And without it, nobody knows how close you are to turning, making the Villadorian survivors homicidally paranoid about anyone not wearing one. So we head out with Hakon into the open city for the first time, and Hakon tells us that the fisheye is in another part of Villador, called the Central Loop, but the only known path to it is heavily guarded by peacekeepers, so it's a no-go for now. And now would be a good time to explain the current political situation in Villador too. As the world was collapsing, the GRE turned Villador into a fortress city, building massive walls around it to keep people out, as well as to keep the infected and survivors inside. And these walls ended up being the main thing that kept the city from being overrun with infected from outside. In this part of Villador we are in, Old Villador, is currently split between two factions. The survivors of the Bazaar, you know, the people who just tried to lynch us for not having a cool bracelet, and they're a lot like the Tower survivors from Dying Light 1, except far more xenophobic and headstrong. And there's the Peacekeepers, or the PKs for short, and they're a militaristic faction of old military personnel who act like sort of a police government in Villador, spending most of their time fighting renegades and the infected, while attempting to keep the peace amongst the survivors with a bit more force than some would prefer. But harsh times call for harsh measures, and their style of rule is causing some extreme tensions with the free-spirited Bazaar survivors. And finally, there's the Renegades, who for all intents and purposes are just evil bandits who dress like punk rockers in The Purge or something. But in the grand scheme, the Renegades are led by a one Colonel Williams, aka the Butcher, a former military colonel who got his charming nickname from when he allegedly gave an order to mow down 64 people during a large protest in Villador 12 years ago. And not only that, but he also allegedly gave the order to bombard Villador with THV GenMod, a strange compound that was supposed to be a sort of airborne vaccine that was designed to kill all the infected and leave healthy survivors unaffected, which was delivered via missile strikes, essentially gassing the infection out of Villador. However, in a twist that's so cartoonishly cruel it's actually kind of hilarious, the GenMod failed completely, and instead of killing the infected, it killed all living things that made contact with it, resulting in 2 million deaths in an event later known as Black Monday. And the worst part? The THV GenMod still plagues Villador, spreading this mucky mustard piss substance over massive parts of the city, and when in contact with it, it destroys your immunity timer and leaves you with only 1 to 2 minutes to get out of the gunk before you die. But at least the GenMod bombardment resulted in some pretty cool glowing crystals to start growing in certain dark areas. So 2 million deaths and parts of the city completely lost for some cool crystals? Seems like a good deal to me. But anyway, bottom line, Williams is seen as a villain and a mass murderer by the people of Villador. And as far as we know, Waltz works for the Colonel, and Waltz is a real asshole. So Williams must be a demon in human skin based on that frame of reference. Anyway, we travel with Hakon and visit a rooftop grove, a place to gather healing and other supplies, as since the streets of Villador are borderline inaccessible due to all the biters shambling around down there. The rooftops of Villador have become a sort of second ground, where lush grass and even trees grow on top of now. And I'm not sure how a tree can take root on a metal sheet, but whatever. And we travel with Hakon some more, use our key to get some GRE tech out of a crate that buys us safety with Hakon's not so great friend here.
How about some electronics, huh?
And we finally head to a hospital and get ourselves a biomarker. And we also find some inhibitors, which are vague virus injections that you can use to level up your health and stamina for every 3 that you collect. But now that we've got our biomarker on, Hakon christens us as a fresh new citizen of Villador, and then we have to escape a volatile prick who shows up to kill us. But once we escape, Hakon then reveals why he saved us to begin with, as he wants us to use our pilgrim skills to take him out of Villador and to go anywhere but here. But we need to get out of Old Villador first, and Hakon tells us about the main conflict that's going on here. A peacekeeper captain named Lucas was murdered just a few days ago, and the PK suspect that one of the Bazaar survivors is responsible, and they've locked down their tunnel to the Central Loop as a response. But Hakon is going to try to find us a way to get through the tunnels regardless, and we soon make a move on it. But while we're inside, Hakon goes ghost on Aiden, and we end up getting arrested by PKs in the tunnel for trespassing. And this PK lady here thinks we're with the Bazaar, and she seems adamant that they killed Lucas. But then this chill dude named Ader, who's the acting captain here now, cuts our bonds and instead levels with us and has a respectful chat with Aiden. He asks about our pilgriming life and asks about the outside world. And I tell him I'm looking for my sister here in Villador, and he seems to like the cut of our jib, and he then recruits us into solving the mystery of Captain Lucas's murder, in exchange for passage through their tunnels. And he says that Lucas's body was found maimed in the Bazaar. His PK rank tattoo was cut clean off his body too, making the PKs heavily suspect any Bazaar resident as the potential killer. But the Bazaar residents all refuse to turn anyone in, and they all claim innocence, which is causing huge tensions between the factions that are close to exploding over. Ader also says that Lucas had some spiky brass knuckles that he called the Lazarus, and if we manage to find them, we might be able to find the killer. And we find the Lazarus knuckles after speaking to some shifty, yet goofy trader guy who points us towards a little girl who says that she just found the knuckles on a dead body, and we get them off of her for cheap because she sucks at haggling.
I'll give you this stupid thing.
but for 500.
I can give you 10.
Deal!
But shit, finding the Lazarus revealed nothing about Lucas's murder, so we need to head to the bazaar and interrogate its leaders directly at Hakon's recommendation. And we then meet the main bazaar players, a guy named Carl who acts like some kind of philosopher prophet, and he loves being a free spirit, and he believes that the end of the world was inevitable because of consumer capitalism anyway, and shit, man.
It was as tragic as it was inevitable. Consumerism, belief in the almighty dollar led to this catastrophe. We want to create a new order based on social bonds, on family and community.
And now that the world has indeed ended, the people can now be free and live a great community-focused life and all this nice hippie bullshit that really doesn't matter. Also, he kind of looks like Robert Downey Jr., and he's not really that important to the story too much. Who's more important, though, is Sophie, the sort of de facto leader of the bazaar, and a no-nonsense lady who just wants to keep her people safe. And Carl says that he's the leader, but in my experience, she's the one who calls the shots around here mostly. She sends Aiden out on a mission to have us gain her trust, having us gather up some zomboid crystals. But her brother and his friends also went out on the same crystal quest a bit earlier, and now he's not answering his radio. So now we gotta go on little brother patrol too. Great. So we head out, find their dead friends, and find Sophie's brother Barney himself, who sort of looks like a biker ganger from a Pokemon game or a member of an apocalyptic Sex Pistols tribute band or something. And he refuses to leave until we find his buddy Birdie, who we find was mauled by zombies, and he dies after talking to his mother one last time. But then we learn that Barney had bugged out and ditched us with the crystals while we were tending to his poor dying friend, all because he didn't trust us or something. And we find him talking mad shit about Lucas in the Bazaar Infirmary, acting pretty nonchalant about his failed crystal hunt that got all his buddies killed. And we confront him about abandoning us and his own friends. And Barney is just a completely insufferable asshole who treats Aiden like complete shit for just trying to help him.
You were supposed to wait for me.
Suppose schmozed. Plans changed.
You used Birdie to distract me. That it?
You don't know shit about me and my people, jackass.
And I get the skepticism, but come on, man. Give me like at least an inch of grace after Aiden helped you out big time. He even more or less saved your life. So we asked Sophie about her brother, where she says that sure, he's an unlikable, standoffish punk who seems pretty unbothered about getting his friends killed, but at least he's loyal though. Yeah, that's great. Good for him. And she also tells us that Captain Lucas was hated by the Bazaar because he seized their windmill and tried to boss them around too much. And now they got even bigger problems, as their main water supplies were taken by two jokers named Joe and Jack, who recently formed a bandit gang and took over the Bazaar's water tower because they were butthurt about getting kicked out of the Bazaar for pulling scams. These guys got their water completely mogged by two chuckle fucks, and they expect to take on the PKs? Really? But anyway, we then learned that Carl tried to make a deal with Jack and Joe, but was captured, and some more Bazaar survivors died in their attack. And that prick Barney yells at us again for not helping Carl fast enough, and I'm already so fucking sick of this dude.
If you'd hurried back there, maybe some of our guys would have made it. I thought a pilgrim like you was supposed to run like a fucking gazelle.
Barney, shut up!
What? If he'd have made it in time to help, we'd be having a party, not a wake.
But we then clean up the Bazaar's mess and attack Jack and Joe's bandit camp, which is a new activity to do in Dying Light like it's Far Cry or something. You kill the enemies and liberate the base. Simple as. And we free Carl, who then points us to go to Sophie's hideout to link back up with her, where we can make the first big choice in the game. Either help the survivors take over the water tower, or help Ader and the PKs take it so they can force the Bazaar to give up Lucas's killer. So we climb the tower and take care of Jack and Joe. And I turn the water tower over to Ader and the PKs, because I really don't care about the survivors. Their faction just isn't very interesting. They're just some more or less well-to-do survivors just trying to make it through the day. But the fact that they wanted to lynch Aiden the second he showed up, their stubborn coldness towards Aiden despite him being nothing but a huge help, and Barney just being an insufferable asshole makes me not really like them that much. Meanwhile, the Peacekeepers are kinda assholes, sure, but they also have a stronger military, a society and lifestyle better suited for taking on a zombie apocalypse, and their acting Captain Ader here has been nothing but respectful and helpful to us, even if he's just ultimately forcing us to be his little errand boy. I mean, I like him way more than any of the bums of the Bazaar, so I give him this sweet gift of a fresh new bandit-free water tower. And after that, we radio Hakon, who recommends that we investigate Barney's hideout for clues about Lucas's murder. And sure enough, in his hideout is a small wall cubby with a chunk of cutout skin with Lucas's tattoo on it. So it seems we found our killer. But then Barney himself walks in, but he still denies killing Lucas, and we get to have a nice scuffle where I finally get to whack this bum in the face with a metal hammer. Feels so good. But we subdue Barney, and he's arrested by PKs. But now that we found our quote-unquote culprit, Ader is going to let Aiden and Hakon through the tunnels and into the central loop. Finally. So we start our passage, but shit goes wrong again, and the power goes out, and the ventilation goes down, and Aiden and Hakon get separated again, and we're forced to hand him our GRE key so he can go get the power back on. But a PK named Anderson shows up and helps Aiden escape the tunnels, giving us an Innocent inhaler, which will reset your immunity timer after huffing that good stuff. So we slaughter zombies, kill a goon, and we escape through a hatch. But that asshole Barney escaped too, and he's waiting for us, as the bizarre survivors attack the PKs while we were in the tunnel. And now Barney is going to kill Aiden for not siding with them. But instead of just crushing my head while I'm down, he tries to take me in a 3-on-1. What, is this guy a rookie or something? And I instead pulverize Barney and his friends and finally kill that dick for good. But old Villador is a complete mess right now. The Bazaar and PKs are in open war, and now renegades are even showing up to cause more chaos. Hell, Anderson got stuck in an elevator, and we couldn't even save her. It's tough out here. But after we kill Barney, we link back up with Hakon after he did another disappearing act on us, and we get our key back. But as soon as he opens a door, he's blasted by a crossbow bolt to the shoulder. And when we go to check out his wound, Aiden notices 3 massive scratch marks on Hakon's chest, which perfectly matches Lucas's Lazarus knuckles. So it turns out Hakon was our Lucas killer the whole time, and he's been lying to us from the jump. And he was the one who carved out the tattoo and framed Barney for it. Which is valid, in my opinion, but whatever. Hakon also reveals that he killed Lucas on Waltz's orders, so he's working for that evil scientist too. And Aiden demands to know where Waltz is. And Hakon says that he was going to meet him under the electric car factory, and he can choose to either help or leave Hakon to die. And although he caused this whole conflict and lied to us from the beginning, he also did save our ass at the bazaar, and he also hooked us up with a biomarker and was our gracious tour guide up until now. So I decided to help him out and call it even though he probably doesn't deserve it. So we then chase and climb after the sniper who shot him, and the sniper is revealed to be some lady, who decides not to shoot Aiden, classy move, and she tells us to tell Hakon that this isn't over before she jumps off the building and paraglides away from us. Wonder who that was. We then tell Ader about Hakon and Waltz, and he agrees to help us confront him in the car park, as Waltz is already known to the PKs as a former GRE scientist and as a general asshole bandit renegade guy. And they want to take his ass down too. So we link with Ader and his squad, and eventually run into Waltz right where Hakon said we would, and find him detained by the PKs, where he then demands Aiden give him the GRE key. And when we tell him, no, fuck you, he activates his evil scientist superpowers, breaking out of his cuffs and punching the PKs with inhuman speed and strength, completely fodderizing everyone around him. Kind of like how Crane was moving at the end of the arena fight, taking the key and knocking Aiden out cold. And Ader is unconscious and is probably dead, and his squad is slaughtered, and now the renegades are here to clean up. Shit. But then, Aiden starts hulking up himself as his volatile bite seemingly takes over, and he becomes like Waltz, a superhuman killer who sees living people as glowing figures in his hunter vision. And we make mincemeat out of these renegade clowns before we pass out from overexertion. But we soon get up and make chase after Waltz into the factory, where we tackle him and try to fight him as he fiddles with his terminal. But his zombie Superman powers are simply too much for Aiden. But Waltz recognizes Aiden from his injection scars and almost chokes him to death, until Aiden asks him where Mia is, which seems to shock Waltz, who recognizes us as the Aiden Babaden himself, and seems almost relieved to see him alive. But then Waltz gets 2 arrows in the back from that crossbow lady, who swoops in out of absolutely nowhere to rescue us. And we take the key back, and then bug out as fast as we can as Waltz goes full beast mode, and chases after us like a volatile would. And we run through the tunnels and lose Waltz after that sniper lady shoots him out of the air, and he falls down an elevator shaft. And after he falls into the black pit below, we learn that the lady's name is Lawan, and she was also experimented on by Waltz, giving us an instant connection with her, which explains why she even bothered to save us in the first place. And Lawan, who is voiced by celebrity guest star Rosario Dawson too, says that Waltz is on her kill list like she's Arya Stark or something, and she wants to kill Waltz, Hakon, the Butcher, and a few other dudes, pretty much every villain in the game. She's a bit of a vindictive and angry person.
That's why I want to kill the fucker. Let's just say everyone on that list deserves a headshot, and Hakon deserves something worse. Fucking great!
She also tells us that Waltz was doing all these child experiments without official sanction from the GRE, so who really knows what his true goal even was. And she also reveals that she was working with our contact. His name is Dylan, by the way, and was helping him escape the city. And Captain Lucas was the one who originally found the GRE key, which was why Waltz ordered Hakon to kill him, although she doesn't know why Waltz wants the key so badly yet. Also, Lawan is the contact we were supposed to meet at the Fisheye, which we learn is actually a survivor settlement and a rooftop bar, and it's called the Fisheye because of a fish-themed blimp that's floating nearby it. And we follow Lawan to her rooftop home, and we get to see the lights of Villador come back on for the first time in 15 years, but only for a few seconds, and whatever Waltz was doing with that key seemed to restart the city's power for a time. So this key has some incredible potential to change Villador forever. But Lawan wants to check on the substations before going to the fisheye first, and she gives us a sweet paraglider to use in the central loop, as the heights of some of the buildings here are well more than double the size of even the tallest buildings in Sector 0 of Dying Light 1. So this thing is very useful for not splatting on the ground when climbing these skyscrapers, and it just offers plenty of new ways to get around in the air, and to get on top of out-of-reach platforms on tall buildings. So we turn a substation back on as part of a tutorial, and then meet Lawan back at the fisheye to discuss our next move. We meet her asshole friend Danior.
Danior! Back off!
And then we decide to use the GRE key to get access to a GRE database, and hopefully find info on our pasts, Waltz, and Mia with it. And we also meet Frank, the Fisheye's leader and the last of the Night Runners, a now defunct faction of survivors who would take inhibitors like Aiden to boost their senses and their physical attributes, and would then go out on dangerous night raids to scavenge supplies out of dark zones, which are buildings, stores, GRE facilities, and other places volatiles and virals make their daytime lairs. And while the juiced up volatiles were out on the street during the night hunting for food, they'd raid these places for troves of untouched supplies to help the survivors the best they could, making them heroes and legends to Villador's survivor population. However, Frank and the Night Runners once tried to make it to the top of the VNC Tower, the tallest building in all of Villador, but their mission failed spectacularly. Several Night Runners died, and plenty of others never even showed up to the mission, and Frank was the only survivor, which has left him as a traumatized and miserable drunk who talks to ghosts in his booze-fueled depressive fugue state. And the Night Runners are kind of like the Star Wars A New Hope Jedi of the game. Their faction is long gone, but their names and acts are legendary. And everyone respects Frank because he was the former Night Runner leader, but I also never understood why they were so revered. We get a lot of vague talk about all the good they did, but we never really see one in action, nor do we ever get a clear idea of what they actually do to help people. And Frank is just a miserable asshole, and Hakon, who is also a former Night Runner, was revealed to be a treacherous murderer who's in the employ of an evil scientist zombie supervillain man. So the Night Runners in this game always felt kinda super meh to me. I mean, Frank is just sorry at this point, and he isn't exactly a beacon of inspiration and hope for his former faction.
But the good news is we'll probably be dead ourselves soon enough. Get the fuck out of my quarters.
But then, PKs show up and report that renegades are attacking the fisheye and the city center, which is an extremely aggressive and strange move for them. So we head out and take them and their apocalypse mortars out, and then rescue Frank with the help of Jack Matt, the leader of the Peacekeepers himself. Unlike in old Villador where the survivors and PKs are at each other's throats, the survivors at the fisheye and the PKs in the central loop are actually super chill with each other, and the PK commander just personally stepped in to save the survivors' leader, and there's almost no conflict between the two factions. I guess they're too busy dealing with renegade goons to attack each other. We report what happened to Ader to Jack, and he tells us to talk to Lieutenant Rowe, who he says may know something about GRE equipment and databases, as well as to bring him some new orders. So we head out and eventually find Rowe, who's an honest but hard-ass dude who kinda looks like Barney's brother or something, after clearing a renegade base, and we deliver the orders and learn that Rowe believes that a GRE database can be found in the Observatory Command Center, but the place is covered in GenMod piss sludge bombs and is completely destroyed according to Rowe. But Aiden wants to head there and check anyway. So we head out and take a look at the place, and Aiden is immediately incapacitated by the GenMod piss sludge. Wow, shocking. A swing and a miss. And we then head back to the Peacekeeper HQ, this large cargo ship that ran aground in the harbor. And we try to get some help from Jack Matt and the Giga-Chin Quartermaster Meyer. And we also see an injured Ader being brought in, so it looks like he survived Waltz's attack, but now he's in a coma. And we can actually do a side quest to help him out later. But for now, we speak to Jack, who says that it's time to save the city and get rid of the renegades for good. And we tell Jack that we need to get into a GRE database. And luckily for us, Jack says he knows about the existence of a few GRE scientists hiding out in Villador, and Jack will help us if we help him with a big project that he's planning. Going to the top of the VNC Tower and taking control of all the comms in Villador so they can rally the troops and spread their PK propaganda far and wide. However, the tower is full of infected and volatiles, and the Night Runners got cooked the last time they tried to reach the top. So this will be the PK's most daring op yet. And in order to carry out this operation, they need tons of UV lamps to bathe the place in purple zombie incinerating light. And the lamps are supplied to the PKs by this fruitcake named Juan Rayner, a guy who supplies the PKs and runs his own network of suppliers and spies. But he isn't an official PK member. He's sort of like a supply chain contractor for them. And Juan himself is one of the most well-connected and wealthiest guys in Villador. And he's kind of dressed like some kind of zombie apocalypse medieval nobleman or a jester or something. But when we meet Juan, we find that he's an incredibly pompous douchebag who's creeping on this uncomfortable looking guy. And he won't work with us until we bribe him with some booze that we find at a now skeletonized rich Polish guy's penthouse. But this booze bribe works, and Juan reveals that he suspects Jack Matt is hiding something. and he isn't telling us the whole of his actual plans. Juan says Jack wants to take out the Butcher, but he can't because he and the Renegades are shacked up in the Villador Dam, and if Jack and the PKs were to attack, the Butcher would surely close up the floodgates, which would not only flood the city, but would also bring up all the GenMod chemicals out of the ground, and surely kill everything still alive. So this Renegade PK conflict goes on indefinitely, under this threat of mutually assured destruction. But now the Renegades are making unprecedented attacks on the city center, so things might be changing for real in this conflict, and you then get a choice to side with Juan, who also says he can find a GRE doctor to get us into the database too, or just to keep trusting Jack Matt. And I chose to side with Juan here, which was a huge mistake in retrospect, but we live with the choices we make. But anyway, Juan tells us that he knows that Jack Matt has been skimming UV lamps from its shipments for some unknown reason, and that the UV lamp plan at the VNC tower makes no sense, as there's not enough electricity to power up all the lamps that he ordered, and he asks us to investigate the commander, and he also gives us a bug to plant on the VNC tower transmitter, so we can gain access to all PK comms later on. And we get the transmitter from some guy living in a cathedral who tries to kill Aiden with Looney Tunes traps and zombie attacks. But we then meet up with the PKs and discuss the VNC tower plan, and the plan is to secure the perimeter, get the power back on, and then ride the elevators up to the top. Easy peasy. And Lawan isn't happy that we're going to try and take the tower like the Night Runners did, and she recommends that we talk to Frank for some advice. But Frank is still being a miserable drunken slob and says climbing the tower is pointless and to not even try.
You can't. Nobody can. Now, fuck you.
Like, okay, thanks for the support, buddy. So we move out regardless, power up the tower, and head inside. And after only a few minor setbacks with a shitty power, we establish a foothold and hang out with some PK guys before we head up for real. And it's actually a really nice little moment of peace with these guys. We hear about their lives and aspirations after we complete this mission, and it's surprisingly wholesome and refreshingly genuine.
My wife, Marcia. Our child is due any day now. I'm over the moon. And we've been trying for a long time to have a kid. And it seems finally I did something right.
See? I told you somebody needs to come over and give you some help.
So these guys are definitely fucking toast. And sure enough, the elevator up fails, and we have to exit right into a zombie Dark Zone ambush, and Ro's men are wiped out. And we find Ro himself missing his whole right hand, who gives us the transmitter and asks us to gather his men's tags before dying, leaving Aiden completely alone and swarmed by infected, and he calls out to Lawan for help until he goes volatile rage mode again and low diffs an entire horde of raging virals, where we then pass out, but we come to our senses after we hear Frank and Lawan's voices on the radio, and Frank finally gives us the smallest smidge of support and points us towards a grappling hook left behind by some Night Runners. And we can use this thing to swing around like Indiana Jones on overhangs and on walls with. And it's nowhere near as OP as the Spider-Man hook from Dying Light 1, but it's still super fun to use and to swing around like Tarzan with fully realized physics. And as we get close to the top, Frank demands that we give up and fly back down to the fisheye, because it's fucking over, dozens have died in the tower, and our sister Mia is probably dead anyway. But Aiden says fuck that to this doom and quitter. We're almost to the top anyway. And we finally use our hook to reach the top of the VNC tower, finally succeeding where everyone else has failed so far. And once Frank realizes that Aiden is really going to make it to the top, all of a sudden, he changes his tune and gets all sappy on us, and reveals that he originally wanted to climb the tower to establish his own Night Runner Radio Star Wars Episode 4, where he would use it to broadcast messages of hope and positivity or something. I'm not really sure. Maybe he'd play funk and the Gap Band on loop to cheer the people up in Villador a little bit. And he asks us to, pretty please, let him take control of the comms tower. And while it's technically the best option for Villador, better than the endless military propaganda at least, and it also leads to arguably the best endings, it's also extremely hard to make myself want to give control over to Frank. He's been nothing but dismissive, drunken, and doomed out, treating Aiden like crap and being a textbook useless bum, only helping once he realized Aiden was actually going to make it to the top. And since the Night Runners all died out way before we even arrived in Villador, the game fails to make me really care about them, as we just hear about how cool and heroic they were, and we never actually see it for ourselves. Meanwhile, the poor PK guys like Ro and his boys fought and died with us, just to get this tower back online, and I actually like that dude Ro. Sure, he was a bit of a prick, I guess, but he also genuinely cared about his men. He was actually a pretty cool guy once you got to know him. He was just trying to do what was best for his guys. And he wasn't even that much of an asshole to begin with, really. So I hand the tower over to the PKs, and by extension, Juan. And then Lawan shows up to pimp slap Aiden for making her worry too much, as she came here after we called her for help in a moment of weakness, before we were saved by our volatile rage mode. But now Lawan is acting kind of weird and angrier than usual, and she now demands that we head over to her old apartment and get her a fresh new pair of sneakers, as she ruined her current ones rushing to come help us. So we check the place out, and come to find that Hakon and Lawan used to be a couple, but she broke up with Hakon after he abandoned Frank's VNC Tower mission, as he believed it was a suicidal quest, and enough Night Runners agree with Hakon to not show up, causing the mission to fail completely, and that's why Lawan wants to kill him. He's a giant pussy. But regardless, the next day, Juan radios us to reward us for our work, and he says that his spies found a GRE doctor in Old Villador. But before he reveals her identity to us, he also says that he learned via comms that Jack has embezzled half the UV lamps from the VNC Tower mission, and he now believes that Jack is planning an assault on the Colonel at the dam now that he's got the tower back online. And then Juan drops a nuke of a conspiracy on us, as he claims that before the fall, Jack, Matt, and Colonel Williams allegedly had a huge beef while they were together in the military, and Williams kept Jack from receiving promotions, making Jack furious at the military as a whole. And that was until the THV Gen Mob bombings were ordered, where according to some soldier witnesses, Jack got an order to retreat, but he completely ignored it, and he instead positioned his men into a place where he knew they'd survive the bombardment, making Jack appear like a victim of the military too, where he then started a rebellion after the Black Monday event, and founded the Peacekeepers as a military rebel faction against the now Renegades, led by Colonel Williams, and all it took was a mass human sacrifice to get his new faction off the ground. But all these are just educated rumors for now, and we're tasked to follow the UV lamp shipments for Juan, where we tail subway cars, and sneak around and follow the lamp shipments until we run into Jack Matt himself. So we ask him bluntly what he's doing with all these lamps, but he just says, "Oh, we're just gonna secure the power plant with these right lamps." Right, mate. So we relay all this information to Juan, and we finally get info on the GRE doctor from the Sleaze Master himself. We learn that she lives at the bazaar, and her name is Dr. Veronica Ryan. Sick. There's our end to the observatory. So we head back to the bazaar, and we find it mostly abandoned and completely ransacked, along with an injured Sophie, who says that the PKs attacked the place after the attack on the tunnel facility, leaving the bazaar survivors broken and scattered as a faction. And even though we betrayed her, killed her brother, and indirectly destroyed her entire faction by sparking a war between the bazaar and the PKs, she still tells us where Dr. Veronica Ryan is, and then she lies down, lamenting that all her work has been for nothing. And honestly, I don't really care about these bazaar fools. But then we get another call from Juan, and he says to go spy on Jack Matt some more. So I decide to see this plot thread through to the end. So I trace Jack's signal until we enter a subway station to find PKs, a renegade driver stoner dude, and even Lawan's friend Danior is in on this deal. And it seems like Jack lied to us, as the PKs are working with this driver guy. I call him Silly Stoner Steve.
I like everybody, really. You too, man. I love you.
And they were going to use him to smuggle something into the Renegade base. And we end up cornering him after he overhears our radio. And we get him to reveal that the PKs were planning to Trojan horse the Renegade's base, as Steve would smuggle in some PK shooters in his van, and they take care of the rest from there and hopefully not flood the city. Which is not a great plan. Plenty could still go wrong, and we could all end up with a toxic, piss-flooded city. But at least we know what's going on now. And we report all this information to Juan again, and he says he's going to set up a trial against Jack Matt for ignoring the retreat order, and for trying to attack the Renegades in a pretty ballsy move. And he then tells us to meet with a Renegade officer, who claims to have been a direct witness to Jack ignoring the Gen Mod bombardment retreat orders. And when we arrive at the meeting point, we're met by Hakon again, who is still Waltz's little whipping boy, it seems. And he's here to take our GRE key, and we have to duke it out with Hakon and some Renegade backups. So we beat the piss out of him and ask Hakon why he abandoned Lawan and Frank. But Hakon says that he never meant to betray them. And he says that after the VNC Tower mission failed, he tried to ingratiate himself with Waltz to spy on him. But Waltz became suspicious of Hakon and threatened to kill Lawan over it. So he left her to protect her from Waltz's Balkan rage. Not a great plan, man. Seems like Waltz sniffed you out pretty much right away. What were you fucking thinking? But Hakon isn't done with us. So round 2, and we beat Hakon within an inch of his life. And we tell Juan about all this new info, which he's quite satisfied with. So he tells us to finally go meet Veronica Ryan and to wrap this shit up. But as we turn to go, Hakon gets back up, and he admits that he regrets chickening out and wants to prove himself to Lawan and Frank again. Somehow. And I chose not to fight Hakon. But then Lawan comes in, itching to put Hakon down for good. And I try to convince her to not execute this clearly beaten man, and she angrily agrees to not kill him for now. But then Hakon betrays us yet again and gives Lawan a light clout in the ear before escaping. But once all that's done, we finally go and meet Veronica, who she says was just a mid-level doctor, but she wants to access the database too, as she wants to know what exactly they were doing at the GRE facility here. So we head to the observatory and get in using some MacGuffin immunity sticks that Veronica has, which allows us to resist the killer piss sludge for a short while. So we finally get inside and access an underground GRE facility and crawl our way through it with Veronica until we stumble upon her old office, where we learn that she wasn't just a mid-tier doctor, but rather was the director of the entire GRE Field Labs department. So Aiden confronts her about Waltz's deranged child experimentation, and she says that the real reason she came here was because she regretted the test that they did on Aiden and all the other kids, as she explains that it was a sort of necessary evil, as young children apparently showed a strong natural resistance to the virus, and it seemed like the last hope for finding a cure. And Veronica said that they almost had a cure, but then the world went tits up before they could finish their work. So much for that. Child torture with nothing to show for it. A very common GREL. We then reach the central server rooms and finally get access to the GRE database, where we learn Aiden's surname, Caldwell. Cool. It's about as good a name as any. And we also learned that he had an unusually strong resistance to the virus, making him one of Waltz's best subjects. But when we search for Mia, we get no results at all, which is odd, since she definitely was a patient in our bald child lab. Come to think of it, actually, she was suspiciously the only non-bald child there. So maybe she had special status or something. But we at least learned that all of Waltz's experimenting went down at a place called X13. And we see a map of Villador with some marked locations. But then some renegades break in, and we gotta slaughter them like cattle. And once they're taken care of, we learn that those marked locations were actually targets for missile bombardment, as it seems that Waltz used the key earlier to activate a failsafe protocol that involves a huge missile attack on Villador, which is currently targeting a survivor settlement in the central loop. So we desperately radio Frank to tell him that we got enemy Predator missiles inbound. But since we didn't give him the VNC comms tower, he says he can't warn people fast enough. But we then have to escape the GRE facility. But then, Waltz himself busts in while going volatile rage mode. He chases us outside, and we have to fight Waltz one-on-one for the first time. And he's got like explosive virus force and shockwave powers all on top of his volatile tier strength. And this dude is like a full zombie supervillain now. And we try our best to fight Waltz, but it's useless. And he picks up and throws Aiden like 50 feet to the other observatory where Veronica is. But our volatile bite takes over again, and Aiden then brutally mauls Veronica to death in a rage. Jesus. We then wake up to get lorded over by Waltz, and we see a giant missile take out a whole skyscraper in the central loop. Bad day for Aiden. We're then rescued by Lawan, who always comes through in the clutch, and she drags us to safety. And Aiden feels like a monster for killing Veronica like that. And shit, I don't blame him. But Lawan talks us down from the ledge, tells us that we aren't the monster we temporarily became, and to let brutal maulings be bygones. And she reminds us of the real end goal here, sliming out Waltz and Williams. So we head out again, and now understand that Waltz is using the key to call in all these missile attacks. But for what purpose? We gotta find out. We also see that the entire skyscraper has come down, leaving a giant cloud of dust that actually makes this whole city block a temporary dark zone, which I thought was a really cool little scene. We also help out Juan, who says Matt is now out to kill him, as proven by a PK squad that comes to kill us. And once we deal with them, Juan reveals that he's been in contact with Colonel Williams himself, and Juan says that Williams isn't responsible for the Gen Mob bombardment, and he's actually extremely misunderstood. But Jack is planning to attack the dam immediately, and we need to find Williams first, so we can find Waltz and prevent him from flooding the city and kill her piss. So Juan says he'll get in contact with the goofy renegade driver Steve to help us get into the renegade base later on. And we then get a call from Lawan to come to the fisheye, as it was just attacked by renegades again, injuring several survivors, and they stole all their supplies. And unfortunately, Frank's injuries were too much for him, and he dies, which leaves Lawan completely distraught. And now she wants nothing but vengeance against Williams and Waltz, which isn't really a huge character development. But Aiden tries to convince her to not go on a suicidal revenge murder quest, and we even spend the night together. As friends, naturally, because Aiden is just so classy. And she promises not to attack the renegade base before going to sleep. But of course, Lawan couldn't let the lust for vengeance go, and she leaves as we were sleeping to go put Waltz and Williams on a t-shirt. And we then move to meet the driver. We have to go through hordes of volatiles and PKs, and through the destroyed building ruins, and we even have to murk Meyer with cold blood in the process, as she tries to stop us. And we then hop into Steve's van and get into the Renegade Dam stronghold, but the whole place is a massacre. Lawan arrived early and shot everyone with her crossbow, it seems. And we find her holding Williams and his wife at crossbow point, and I guess she just soloed this entire base. Williams didn't even have time to flood the city, which makes me wonder why we even worried about that in the first place, but whatever. But Williams says that if he's killed, more missiles will strike the city and it'll kill everyone. And Williams says that the strikes are part of a, quote, fail-safe protocol. And the colonel claims that he had stopped an initial bombardment that saved the city 11 years ago. And we then get a choice to command Lawan to kill him or to stand down. And I have her stand down to see what Colonel Butcher Gas Bomb Dropper has to say for himself, because he's only been a very distant figure until now. Also, we'd lose our only lead on Waltz if we offed him, so we convince her to stand down, and Williams promises not to hurt her as she's hauled off. And Williams says that Waltz turned the power back on and started the missile strike so he could access X13. And Williams also says that he lost control of Waltz, who took most of his men and left Williams, and he's been the one calling the renegade shots up until now, not Williams, who has been more or less hiding in his damn fortress this whole time. He also tells us that he worked with Waltz to power up his men with inhibitors, but when Williams eventually confronted Waltz about what his plans are, Waltz just sunned him and took all his men, making Williams look like a complete moron for trusting this obviously evil scientist supervillain man, who ended up stealing his entire army from him. But on the way out, we learned that Lawan had killed some of Williams' men and escaped, but he still didn't hurt her like he promised, which proves his honor to us. So we then head out and finally go for X-13, where we also get a flashback that reveals that Mia was deathly sick with some kind of illness, and Walt seemed to be quite fatherly to Aiden, saying that he alone can save her. But we finally get to X-13 and run into Lawan again, where she angrily decides to work together with us to finally stop Waltz. And we also run into Hakon yet again, who is here to kill us for good, and that is the only way, and fuck it, you know this ain't you, Hakon. So he finally turns on his renegade handlers, and we massacre them all together as one big happy family. We then see an injured Hakon and Lawan finally reconcile a little bit, and they send Aiden on ahead to finally confront Waltz. And we then realize that X-13 is the same facility that Aiden and Mia were kept in as kids. And from some old notes and documents, we learn that Waltz was actually mostly beloved by the kids for his kindness towards them as they were being experimented on. And we see that Mia is indeed still alive and is being carried by Waltz, although she's bald, frail, and on death's doorstep from her illness. And we chase Waltz into the central command room and find out he's actually carefully attending to Mia, and we come face to face with him. And Waltz then jogs Aiden's extremely selective memory with just a stern stare. And Aiden remembers that Mia has a strain of the THV virus, and we actually promised Waltz that we'd stick together, not Mia. We also learned a truth nuke, that Mia is actually Waltz's own daughter, not Aiden's real sister. And all this work, child experimentation, and death was all done just to cure her. However, curing her also means bombarding the city with missiles as part of the failsafe. But the key would also reactivate X-13, which would hopefully allow Waltz to continue his work and eventually save Mia. Somehow, through a machine or special ventilator medbed thing like it's a Trump AI slop conspiracy. It's kind of vague on how she'd actually be cured in X-13, but Aiden won't let the whole city get turned to rubble. So we start our final boss fight with Waltz, where he uses more virus force field powers and AoE attacks, where he also constantly knocked me off this tiny platform we were battling on with his huge attacks. But after that, we then gotta chase him across platforms as he jumps all around the room, until our volatile beast powers kick in again, and we pummel Waltz into submission.
You fight them for the last ray of dying light.
Hey, he said the line! And then he goes full volatile too. But our volatile powers are way better, and we easily low diff Waltz. But then we see Mia on her feet, and she says that this has all gone on for way too long, and she doesn't want the cure if it means others will have to die for it. And she hands us the key, but then Waltz knocks it into a pile of Genmod piss sludge, and it completely melts into nothing. And the reaction from Aiden's voice actor just feels so genuine. It's actually a really good line. Oh my god. Mia then collapses, and Waltz is now just in complete shambles, and he begs us to help save her. But we hear Lawan on the radio, who says all the missiles are still going to launch imminently, and they're going to level Villador. We then make one final choice. Either let Lawan destroy the missiles, saving Villador but dooming Mia and Lawan herself, or we can try to go save her, which will or might save Mia and Lawan, but it would also condemn thousands to die from missile bombardment. And realizing that the lives of everyone in Villador should probably outweigh the lives of one sick dying girl and one angry crossbow lady, I let Lawan blow up the missiles, but I fucked up my story choices big time. So Lawan dies in the explosion, Mia dies shortly after, and Juan takes over all of Villador with a new faction of, quote, bright peacekeepers after he ousted Jack Matt. But his new rule sucks, and riots break out over water and food supply shortages, causing dozens to die in stampedes and other violent events as Juan retreats into his opulent fortress, away from the angry masses. And I should have given the tower to Frank, as it'll help him warn people about the first missile attack, and we can get a much better ending where Hakon saves Lawan from the missiles, and the Night Runners end up returning as a faction to help out the survivors of the city. And in my Juan ending, Lawan isn't even saved, even though I kept Hakon alive for the entire game, so it's just extra booty. And finally, there's also the Peacekeeper ending, where if you sided with Jack Matt instead of Juan, Villador becomes an authoritarian police state with protests and supply shortage problems of its own. And afterward, Aiden decides to leave Villador no matter what, as Mia dies shortly after the game's ending too, no matter what you do, whether you left the city under Night Runner, Juanian, or PK control, whether you took Hakon or Lawan with you out of the city, and whether or not you let the city get bombed to oblivion or not. Mia is just cooked, and we see Spike enter the Fisheye Canteen and asks after Aiden, but the bartender says that he's already left, and we see Aiden walk off into the unknown future, waiting to see how his volatile virus will develop in the days to come. And with that, the story of Dying Light 2 comes to a close. And while I can commend the story for its ambitious scale, lore, and emphasis on player choice throughout, the story is also, unfortunately, a total mess, and is clearly a reconstructed chimera of plotlines, factions, and characters from the carcass of a much larger intricate, and reactive game world. Aiden himself is an okay protagonist at best, and I actually really liked his voice performance from Jonah Scott. Aiden has some pretty good lines and moments, but he also isn't all that interesting. He's a sympathetic guy, and we fully understand his plight and goals, and his relative lack of knowledge about the old, non-zombie infested world can be pretty charming at times. But besides that, he doesn't have a lot of interesting things to say. His most common lines are, "Where's Waltz?" and "Where's Mia?" And he's most definitely a follower, not a leader, and at times, a complete pushover. But I found I still liked him overall. The voice performance mostly carries him in my opinion. But unfortunately, most of the other characters in the main story aren't very likable at all. The bizarre survivors seem hell-bent on making the players choose to help the PKs over them, as they want to kill you the moment they see you, treat you like an untouchable chud incel freak unless you literally become Jesus for them, and Barney is probably my least favorite character in the entire Dying Light franchise. And other characters like Lawan could have been great, but I just found her character to be too angry, standoffish, one note, and revenge obsessed to be truly likable. I felt like she brought up killing or revenge in damn near every other dialogue scene, and it was a bit much. Like, sure, we get a few tender and even sweet moments with her, and Rosario Dawson honestly does a pretty good job with the material she's given, but 90% of the dialogue is her being stubborn, seething about getting violent revenge on her enemies, and telling Aiden to fuck off or fuck himself. It's just kinda off-putting, and it keeps me from really liking her when I constantly feel like she's about to lose her temper over minor issues, and bury a crossbow bolt in Aiden's head as we beg her not to kill someone. And also, all the factions besides the PKs are pretty bland and uninteresting. The survivors are literally what the name gives you. Survivors just trying to make it through the apocalypse. But they don't feel much different than, say, the Tower survivors from Dying Light 1. But in that game, the tower was an improvised stronghold, made only a few weeks after being in the quarantine zone. So it makes sense that in that game, they're a pretty loose group who don't have a super clear hierarchy and can mostly get by with just communal efforts and guys like Brecken running for supplies. But it's like 15 years into the apocalypse in Dying Light 2, and it seems like these survivors haven't evolved much societally, beyond that initial ramshackle community of generic survivors, which just makes them feel uncompelling to me overall. And sure, you got guys like Carl over here waxing poetically about vague platitudes about community and freedom, but that's about it. These guys are blander than unseasoned chicken breast and are stubbornly skeptical about Aiden to a kind of ridiculous degree. And it doesn't look good when the authoritarian cop government faction is twice as respectful and understanding to Aiden than the supposedly community-centered survivors. Also, the Renegades as a faction are just a total mess. They look and are evil as shit. But then at the very end of the game tries to force nuance in, by showing that Williams isn't truly the villain that everyone thinks he is. He genuinely wants to save the city and to help his own people, and that Waltz was the one calling the renegade bandit shots, and he was the one commanding them to attack survivor settlements and to just be a general menace during the game's story. But when we finally meet Williams, all of this just makes him look like a complete idiot, as he essentially let Waltz turn his men into inhibitor-juiced bandit thugs who are only loyal to him. And I guess Williams just never bothered to figure out what his clearly evil mad scientist underling was planning. And then when he tries to finally step to Waltz just suns Williams, leaves and takes most of his men with him, leaving Williams to just sit on his buns and wait for the battle to come to his doorstep. And then when we actually encounter the Renegades in the story, they're more or less just Rise's gang again. And the plan for Williams and the Renegades was supposed to be much different originally. An early E3 gameplay trailer for Dying Light 2 shows Aiden going to the dam to confront Williams in a completely different context and at a completely different point in the story. And Williams oversees a thriving renegade settlement full of families and children. And then Aiden ends up turning the dam pumps on, which reveals a whole new area of the map that was eventually cut from the game. But whatever plans they had for Williams and his renegades must have been completely scrapped, reworked, and then shoved into the game's finale. And the big bad butcher just comes off as a complete bum by the end of the story. And moving on, Juan is just a guy. He's a pompous, elitist douchebag who's also very politically sharp and ambitious, but his faction is mostly spoken about and not seen. And I feel like most of the interesting plot points for him happen right at the end or completely off screen, which reduces the impact of the work we do for him tremendously. And his ending is some actual dog poop. Dog shit, even. As Juan was also originally supposed to lead his own faction that were called the Scavengers, but they were completely cut from the game, and Juan remained as more or less a one-man faction, who now exists as a PK contractor. And finally, the main villain of Waltz and the quest to find Mia just ends up falling completely flat by the end of the game. Aiden having extremely convenient selective memory about his past just feels contrived to keep the mystery alive as long as possible with no real explanation besides, it's the child experiment volatile serum messing with your head, man. And Waltz himself is just kind of a bad villain. He looks like some kind of vampire lord with his evil trench coat and scarred, fucked up face. And he's just a murderous monster and a commander of a punk thug bandit army for the entire game. Until we reach the final section of X13, where we learn that he's Mia's dad, and he did all this killing and city destroying just to try and cure her. which is a noble cause, sure, but it's hard to have sympathy at all for the guy, or even try to begin to justify his actions when he just got done leveling a skyscraper, attacking and killing innocent survivors, and leaving a wake of death and destruction all over Villador while chasing after our GRE key. Like, yeah, I'm sure your tragic backstory will make me overlook you disemboweling your former ally with your bare hands for the simple crime of daring to not want everyone he knows to die in a missile bombardment. Walt's willing to kill thousands of survivors to maybe save one person with a medbed or something. I'm still unsure as to how Waltz would cure Mia and why Villador needed to get atomized to do so. And again, it just feels contrived to try and force a hard choice at the end of the story. Also, by the end of the game, I found it really hard to care about Mia at all, as Aiden may care about her, sure, but Mia as the player really didn't. And sure, we get those flashbacks to show how cute and precious Mia and Aiden's unofficial sibling relationship was, and really tug at those heartstrings. But it doesn't really feel authentic, and it feels more like they're trying to beat you over the head with sentimentality for an eventual heartbreak moment. And it just feels emotionally cheap, I suppose. But the plot to find Mia soon falls into the background of its own narrative, as we become Villador's best errand boy of all time, and we get caught up in all the people and the plots and politics on offer here. And by the time we meet Mia again, there's plenty of other, non-deathly sick characters we'd care much more about than her, and she dies no matter what for each ending. So it's not like we can even do anything or even make a certain sequence of choices to save her, leaving the whole main plot just feeling hollow and ultimately disappointing, which isn't helped at all by Waltz's weirdly bad voice acting. It just sounds so off most of the time. He just sounds so bored. It's weird.
You tortured us! You were hurting me! And Mia!
No, Aiden. I would never hurt my own child. Mia is my daughter. And you know that. I was looking for a cure. For her, for everyone. With your help. Yes. Now leave while you still can.
Plus, the conspiracy around Jack Matt and working for Juan was confusing and hard to follow for me, and I still don't really know where those embezzled lamps ended up. And the whole plot point is wrapped up in side quests that interject themselves into the main story with scattered pacing, and Jack Matt being a twist villain also barely ends up coming into play, as by the time he'd be exposed for letting the city get bombed without evacuating, and then trying to kill Williams to cover it all up, the game is literally over, and it happens off screen. So unfortunately, besides cool moments like reaching the top of the VNC tower and the whole skyscraper being reduced to rubble, along with plenty of fun to be had in most story missions gameplay-wise, the main overarching plot here is mostly a story to forget. Well, with the story covered, let's move on to parkour, which is probably Dying Light 2's best aspect, keeping up the trend from its predecessor. The parkour is still fundamentally the same. It's still the best first-person platforming in the biz, but Aiden, thanks to his childhood volatile juice injections, can jump higher, run faster, and climb longer than Kyle Crane ever could. This white boy has some Jordan-esque hops. Dude is operating on a different gravity scale than anyone else. We also got plenty of new moves, like swinging from bars like a monkey, swinging on ropes, a physics-based grappling hook that you swing on instead of it just turning you into Spider-Man. Now it's more like you're an apocalyptic Indiana Jones with this thing. And it's pretty fun to use, and it's got a way higher skill ceiling than Dying Light 1's zoom hook. You gotta use Aiden's weight and physics to properly swing around, and then combine it with some well-placed hook throws to keep your momentum up. And if you mess up, you'll likely get sent flying into a wall, and you'll just be dangling there. Making any hook-based parkour you do feel ultimately more interesting, it makes it feel less like a straight-up cheat code that just makes parkour a complete joke. You can now ride winches to get up tall buildings quickly. There's a new dart mechanic that gives you stamina-draining sprinting skills that you can chain into tackles and zombie vaults. And that classic Dying Light 2 move where you tackle a zombie off a building, fall 15 stories, but then land completely unharmed. You can unlock grip upgrades that allow you to hold on to a ledge after making a huge jump off of Dying Light 2's taller buildings. Tic-tac wall running makes a return. Extra wall jumps to get one last boost to reach that ledge that was just out of reach before. A double tic-tac that'll make you feel like you're Mario as you chain wall jumps together, which is only slightly jarring, and plenty of other small schmoement options. And the parkour here does feel floatier, but much more robust. And there's simply just a lot more stuff to climb and jump on in densely packed and tall Villador. Aiden also now settles on ledges when you grab them, letting you hang and choose if you want to climb up, drop, or jump the other way. And Villador's larger size and height gives you plenty of space to use all your new moves and tools. You can go several minutes in both areas of the map where you just simply never touch the ground. There are layers to this shit, literally. And it's still super fun to run, climb, and now glide through these zombie-infested city streets. And I never got tired of jumping around, really. Chaining jumps from rooftop to rooftop, exploring these actually impressively tall buildings, and just having a lot of fun in the open-air urban jungle gym that is Villador. Swinging like Indiana Jones on the grappling hook to find new optimal routes, and to pull off some cool moves. And overall, it's a slightly slower and floatier, but ultimately more advanced and expanded out version of Dying Light 1's great parkour. And it's definitely Dying Light 2's best aspect. This type of first-person climbing and jumping has yet to be topped in my opinion. Not even the Beast can match the amount of schmoement here. And my only real issues with the parkour here revolve around the physics of the drop kicks and some of the other special moves, as the drop kick in Dying Light 1 was my favorite move in the entire game, and it was always just great to run, jump, and then punt these zombies with your feet. And there was a great sense of physical impact and just a great amount of boom to it. But for some reason, the physics here seem to have taken a solid step back from Dying Light 1's genuinely excellent physics interactions and reactions. And when doing a dropkick, which also feels slower and floatier than it is in 1, and it doesn't feel like my feet are making contact with and kicking an enemy or a zombie away, but rather it feels like I'm force pushing away the entire zombie with my legs, if that makes sense. There's a slight disconnect with the impact, and it makes the dropkick feel less satisfying to pull off as a result. It's just missing that initial boom. And finally, the clear sense of progression and how fast and efficient you are at parkour is now completely lost here, as Aiden starts out as a parkour god from minute 1. And while it's certainly helpful, the parkour skill tree lacks the clear and satisfying sense of progression as you get faster and better at climbing from level ups. And it mostly just unlocks useful, but very situational parkour moves, making Aiden feel pretty stagnant as a character in terms of speed and skill. And these scaled back physics are the perfect segue into the combat, as it gives Dying Light 2's combat a distinct feel compared to Dying Light 1. Where in Dying Light 1, the combat was pretty physical and brutal, and each zombie had the potential to pose a serious threat to Kyle based on his positioning and situational awareness. But the Dying Light 2 zombies, well at least the average biters, have become borderline fodderized thanks to the less physical combat. And it makes Dying Light 2's moment-to-moment combat feel faster paced and far more hack and slashy and arcadey than it being a brutal physical fight. And it's a much easier game overall. Even the hard mode isn't even super hard, and it's actually pretty well balanced. Well, compared to the viral gankfest that is Dying Light 1 hard difficulty. And even with crappy early game weapons, you can cut through biters with ease, taking several shamblers on at once and slicing through their bodies with a sharpened street sign on a stick like they're made of butter. Even the kick feels like I'm doing a minor force push instead of an actual kick. In Dying Light 1, the spot on the zombie you kicked is where the force was applied, and their whole body would react to the kick accordingly. And now, kicking feels like you're a Jedi youngling, and you just hit a clone trooper with that dollar store force push. And the enemy physics and ragdolls have indeed taken a technological step back, which is disappointing no matter which way you slice it. Literally in this case. Hell, even the stomping move feels way floatier and way less satisfying to pull off, but at least it goes pretty hard. Aiden throws his whole body into stomping the enemy's head, smashing down with both feet like he's Mario jumping on a Goomba. And while you're slicing and dicing on zombies, you can now perform finishers by pressing F on an enemy when this skull prompt appears, where you do a sick animation of brutally smashing a zombie's head open, stabbing them to death, chopping their heads off, stomping their heads in, or even doing them like how the Mountain did over in Martel. And they're sweet animations. And in fact, the gore in this game is all around super solid, but just makes killing the zombies even easier than ever. You can lock in a free kill with an easy F prompt. So to up the difficulty, you now got new armored zombies, who will make your weaker weapons bounce off of them, plus your classic special infecteds. Goons, these new spitter/screamer zombies who look like lesser volatiles, the volatiles themselves of course, demolishers, and some new looking spitters. And there's even some brand new ones, like the Hag, who are these tiny female zombies with huge clawed hands that jump on the heads of other zombies and dive bomb you while hollering like banshees. Kinda looks like my ex-wife in the family court parking lot after I got full custody. Virals are way less annoying to deal with now, praise Shang Di. They got a solid nerf, and they won't surround you and punch combo you to death in a few seconds while blowing up your speakers with growls and screams, because you farted too loudly near a super grate or some shit. Instead, they now have this homing dive attack that you gotta dodge out of the way of, or else you'll feel like David Carr or something. However, the most significant updates have been made to the human vs. human combat, and there's way more of it in Dying Light 2. And it's significantly better than Dying Light 1's. But it's also still not great overall. Human enemies now have much more obvious attack and block telegraphs, thank God, and it's no longer a crapshoot on whether you'll land a hit on the enemy, or they'll just brush it off like a calm breeze with a lazy parry, as they'll clearly wind up their melee attacks and hold their weapons out to block when their guard is up. And there's now 4 types of new human enemies: normal guys with one-handed weapons, big guys with two-handed weapons, alarm guys who call nearby enemies to back them up, which is probably not a great idea in a world where raging, dive-bombing zombies are attracted to sound, but whatever, and ranged guys with bows. And there's sometimes guys who release a huge green Genma gas cloud on death, which literally looks like they unleashed a massive fart before dying. And I've seen renegade enemies turn from the gas and attack you with just their bare hands, which I thought was a great little detail. So the strat here is to take out the alarm guys, then the ranged guys, kill the normal guys, and then finish with the big guys. And it works mostly well. And there's some really great animations when enemies are hit or killed. And I really love the one where they get smashed down and then they pop back up like it's that I Show Speed Five Nights at Freddy's gif. But like I said, It's far from perfect, and the human combat flow is based around perfectly parrying hits and then doing a space plus mouse 1 input combo to then vault over the now stunned enemy and drop kick another, where Aiden will then magnetize to one guy and kick him into another dimension. But it's crusty as all hell, and oftentimes didn't work because Aiden's internal lock-on targeting system failed to find a target. We can also dodge like in Dying Light 1, and Aiden's dodge is farther and faster than Crane's, but it also temporarily stops stamina regeneration. And if you try to dodge while you're out of stamina, Aiden will just stumble and trip over himself like a buffoon, making stamina management more important than ever. So don't spam it too much like you did in Dying Light 1. But the dodge here is still quite powerful. You can also get upgrades to perform perfect dodges, which will also stun foes and make them vaultable as well, if you even care. And it's overall a big improvement over Dying Light 1's human combat, but it's also still kind of annoying. Enemies can still get blocks up inhumanly fast, and getting surrounded is just a complete clusterfuck. But hey, it could be worse. It could be the Dying Light 1 human combat. Also, I guess I ran into a few times where enemies just inexplicably killed themselves off screen by walking on spikes or falling off buildings when I wasn't looking or something, and I'm not really sure what that was all about. And overall, the combat just has a whole different pace and feeling compared to Dying Light 1, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. Slashing down zombies and special infecteds like I'm playing first-person Elden Ring was always fun. And yes, the combat is indeed fun, in my opinion. It's just got a different feeling and with reduced physics capabilities, and the human combat is serviceable instead of being a complete pain in the ass. But if you really like the physical and more brutal combat of Dying Light 1, I completely understand if you weren't too hot on Dying Light 2's combat. But anyway, let's now move on to the world of Villador and its myriad of side quests and activities, something that's a huge step up from Dying Light 1. In Dying Light 1, besides the large amount of side quests, there wasn't exactly a huge amount of side activities. You had quarantine zones, challenges, bolter feeding grounds, running away from scary-ass volatiles in the middle of the night, and that was more or less it. But Dying Light 2 has easily doubled, no wait, tripled, maybe even quadrupled the amount of activities. Techland decided that this series didn't have enough climbable Ubisoft towers, so you now have windmills and water towers, which are parkour challenges to get to the top, where with water towers, you can capture them and supply either the PKs or the survivors with that clear colored liquid gold. And then you can capture its corresponding windmills to increase the amount of faction-based assistance items in the area, with the survivors being more parkour-based, and they place zip lines, air vents, airbags, and more. And the PKs are more combat focused, placing traps and turrets, like these gear shooting turrets that are actually pretty fun to use. And taking the time to climb these things allows you to help buff your preferred playstyle all across Villador. But they have very little effect in the story and its outcomes. The factions kinda DJF about who gets the water. There's also new electrical substations too, which are sort of like puzzle areas where you gotta hook up breaker boxes to their corresponding plugs while using a limited amount of wire. So you just gotta find the shortest distance possible and hook them up, which is an okay puzzle I suppose, but most of the actual puzzle is just figuring out the building layout and opening one-way doors. And it won't exactly have your brain steaming from overuse. There's now plenty of night exclusive activities too, which were much needed from Dying Light 1's lack of non-level grinding or bolter spawn camping night content. These places are completely inaccessible during the day, since volatiles are in there hiding from the sun, so when they're out at night doing some prowling, we can get inside these places and loot them like an apocalyptic burglar. We first got small dark zones, which are usually old shops, where you can scavenge a myriad of supplies for Dying Light 2's expanded crafting system. There's GRE quarantine buildings, where you gotta delve into a multi-story zombie-infested GRE facility to get your hands on some inhibitors to upgrade your health and stamina. There's now metro stations you can clear out to unlock fast travel points, and Dying Light 2 is the first Dying Light game with fast travel this accessible. And to turn it on, you either gotta parkour around a filthy gen mod piss-filled dungeon to turn on a couple generators, or sometimes it'll just be a brawl with squatting renegades, or both. They really make you work for these travel points. And there's also GRE anomalies, where at night, a boss zombie will appear, a super tall abomination with twisted THV tendrils coming out of its back, like a pair of demonic alien wings, and it can spit gunk at you, and it hops around the anomaly arena like the goddamn flame hybrid, and you gotta just beat it to death in a minor boss fight to get your hands on some more inhibitors. But it's the same boss fight each time, the only differences being the GRE anomaly's health and the gang squad it has backing it up. And also, be sure to not have any volatiles on you when you try to fight the abomination, otherwise you'll get ganked. Hard. There's also some small night-specific quests, where an NPC will have you go into a dark zone to retrieve an item for them or something of that sort, for a short little night quest. Also, remember that you have a limited time at night, and you're always on the clock to turn into a cannibalistic abomination. But I never really had a problem with the time limit. It increases as you upgrade yourself with inhibitors, and I was just flush with immunity boosters and UV shrooms, just from scavenging and doing quests, and it's real easy to get more. So the countdown was pretty much a complete non-factor for me when doing some night runs. But overall, there's just way more stuff to do on the map during both day and night. And there's even a whole journal menu dedicated to listing all the side activity locations in Villador that you haven't cleared out yet. And despite being very simple and somewhat repetitive, and it can get literally checklisty after you've done plenty of activities, especially the same ones over and over again, it's still overall a great addition that makes Villador feel much denser, busier, and overall more interesting gameplay-wise than Dying Light 1 ever did. There's almost too much stuff to do. But moving on to the side quests, there's plenty of them, like in Dying Light 1, although they don't reach the same amount of, unique charm that those quests had. And they're mostly a pretty simple fetch quest given to you by some quirky characters, like this opera singer lady who wants you to get her scarf back, or this apprentice craftmaster who's trying to make an electric fence trap with parts you fetch for him, only for him to end up barbecuing a goat with it. And there's also a side quest to help aid her after his nasty encounter with Waltz, and we gotta gather up flowers at the behest of a medicine woman, and make sure we remember the correct pedal length to use, so we don't put the poor guy into a permanent coma. And there's a quest to help a bird watcher to see if birds will ever come back to Villador, and I did a short quest to visit a monument, which gave me some extra lore on how fucked up shit was in Villador as the world was ending, and how 64 people were shot in a riot. And there's for sure some solid side quests here, but also, a lot of the side missions seem to be just simple fetch quests. Learn what you gotta find it, fight some zombies or some renegades, and then just drop the item off in a drop box or just run it back to the quest giver to complete the quest. Sometimes there's no need to even speak to the quest giver again, and the concepts for the quest can be kind of interesting to start, like finding an old photo, killing the turned bitch ex-wife of some guy, or killing a goon so a painter guy can use its blood as red paint. But in execution, it's very meh. It's less of a quest that stands on its own merit, and it's more of an addition to a pre-existing activity area. And these bite-sized quests don't really stand out in your memory like Dying Light 1 quests do, due to the lack of truly strange or interesting scenarios. And many of the quests are just melding together in my memory from how many there are, and how relatively simple they can get. But there's still a few bangers in there. How the fuck are Tolga and Fatine still alive? Also, as the years have rolled on and as Dying Light 2 has been getting more consistent updates, guns have been re-added to the game. And at release, they originally wrote guns out of the story by saying that firearms became mostly worthless after the survivors simply ran out of ammo without the ability to manufacture more bullets. But now they're back, and we do a mid-sized questline with this dude Jay here to find the guns, and make sure some Mad Max reject named Tackhead and his gang of bandit thugs don't get the guns instead, so they can make a bandit utopia at gunpoint or something.
I'm gonna build my people a home, and I'm gonna build it with firearms.
And the guns themselves, especially this pistol I got, have some really nice animations and a good shooting feel, but it's more or less the same as the guns in Dying Light 1. Not much to write home about. Also, Jay introduces survivor missions, along with bounties and agent reputation levels, giving Dying Light 2 here a sort of Destiny 2-esque live service system, where you do these here survivor missions, which are instance missions designed to be played in groups of 4, where you perform a given task, like open 5 crates, defend a generator, what have you, so you can grind XP and increase your survivor level with Jay, which will grant you access to more guns, weapons, and blueprints as you level up. And these missions are just fine, I guess, but they're also not very friendly for solo players like me, with huge zombie horde sizes and massive amounts of juiced up special infected, especially on higher levels. I tried a high level mission, and it was just like me versus 4 elemental special infected, viral hordes, and a GRE aberration, and it was pretty much unwinnable in solo. The game just flat out says to do these missions in multiplayer too, which honestly feels like buckshot to the chest for a solo Dying Light enjoyer like myself. And I doubt anyone is still playing the multiplayer of Dying Light 2 to grind out reputation levels for Jay's guns in 2025. But I could be wrong on that. So I mostly ignored these for the main game solo content. There's also weekly and daily bounties and different agents, or people you can level up your reputation with for even more rewards, with the bounties usually just being generic kill lists like kill goons, hags, screamers, virals, and even volatiles. Any type of infected you can think of. You can also use items, complete story missions, any type of interaction you can really think of as well. And this can all be done to grind out agent ranks for some of the better items in the game. And adds plenty of extra content and reasons to keep playing, sure. But it's also just busy work for good weapons. So do these until you eventually get bored and move on to a different game, I suppose. But again, I doubt there's many people left grinding out RP ranks with this Chinese huntress lady these days. And to be honest, I'm not really looking to do a Destiny-like live service grind for a cool orange tier axe or a gun or a crossbow or something, where I have to log in and do my daily chores just so I can level up with some guys so he can give me a gun or something. And a side note, there's now just a gratuitous amount of cosmetic skin and weapon packs to buy. It feels like I'm looking at the modern Call of Duty microtransaction store. And is that a fucking Chinese Lawan? You may wonder where all these skin packs and Chinese women are coming from. Well, the answer to that is Chinese mega corporation Tencent, who purchased a majority stake in Techland back in 2023. So that could explain some of the more blatant greed going on here, as well as the addition of live service mechanics. But overall, all these considered, there's a massive amount of side content in Dying Light 2. Not all of it excellent or even that good, mind you, but as a sum of all its parts, it makes Villador feel easily twice or thrice as busy and dense than Haran. And there's enough side content here to last for weeks, even if the main side quests don't fully recapture the irreverent magic of the original game, and it more or less turns you into a glorified day laborer at Villador's zombie slaying LLC. But running around this still great looking Villador, with at least something to do around almost every corner, is still a really great boon to the Dying Light formula. And the more activities the better, I say. But all of this is in service of Dying Light 2's newer expanded crafting system, which has way more resources and options now. We got brand new resources like resin, scraps, wiring, blades, feathers, leather, and plenty more. And crafting is mostly done through blueprints like the last game, all of which can now be upgraded, with 3 levels for tools, 6 levels for weapons, and 9 levels for consumables and mods, which is done by using mutation samples and infected tokens to upgrade them, which are new coins that you get by killing special infected, and come in small for weak zombies like virals and screamers, medium for bigger enemies like goons and hags, and large for boss level zombies like volatiles. And you use these infected tokens to buy blueprint upgrades, which will improve your weapons and consumables when you go to craft them, which are now done at new Craftmaster vendors, where you can craft weapons and mods. And equipment can be crafted right out of your inventory, but weapons can be crafted at a Craftmaster only. And you can also buy blueprints for weapons, mods, and what have you. And you can upgrade them at the Craftmaster as well using new infected tokens, which I just mentioned. And you can now only repair items at a Craftmaster too. You can't just do some field surgery with metal parts to bang your machete back into place with just Crane's fingers like you could in Dying Light 1. You now have to pay a Craftmaster for repairs with old world money coins, which are easy to get by just mass selling valuable items like bracelets and jewelry. And of course, your THV piss crystals too. Those things go for a lot of cash. And the repairs are infinite as long as you got the resources and the money. And besides that, it's more of the same from Dying Light 1, breaking into buildings and mass grabbing anything you can pick up and using it to craft mods and gear. And it's just fine for the most part, allowing you to make some sweet weapons and decently ass equipment with only a modest amount of looting. But it's also kind of bloated, cluttered, and scattered. There's just so many resources and materials to keep track of, and the infected tokens just make it even more grindy and cluttered. It's like, sorry kid, you need to kill 3 more large infected to bring your medicine blueprints up to level 8. And I didn't really mess with the crafting too much. I can make do with the weapons I simply looted or purchased 99% of the time. And the only truly bad part about the new looting and the resource gathering is the clothing gear, as Dying Light 2 adds slots for your shirt, pants, gloves, shoes, a wrist guard, and headgear, all of which come with 4 or so small percentage boosts to either combat, health, ranged weapons, or medicine stats. But the way this clothes looting system was implemented is just absolutely asinine. You're just showered in these clothes by finding them in chests, and I ended up with several copies of several different types of gear. And the percentage buffs are nice on paper, but they're just so small and so situational, my eyes would just glaze over seeing that fingerless gloves increase damage to demolishers by like 4% or some shit. I just ended up mostly ignoring the buffs and just wore whatever was the highest level for the maximum amount of armor and damage mitigation. And as far as I could tell, I never actually noticed how the clothes affect the game. It's a cluttered mess for the most part. But from there, you just loot, kill, explore, quest and grind with those instant survivor missions and endless streams of bounties. You have plenty of activities to complete and seemingly an endless checklist of shit to do in Villador. And there's even the Blood Ties expansion. But I didn't look too deeply into it because I thought the story was just downright ridiculous. And it's mostly a collection of challenges that I wasn't all too interested in. I mean, the world is ending and we're doing silly WWE fights to the death. Like, come on, man.
That's why I keep burying all you assholes. You're nothing but shit stains on my shoe soles. Fucking filth!
Like, is it really that serious, man? Like, just fucking relax. Chill out. Jesus. But overall, despite Dying Light 2 being in many ways a complete mess and a reconstruction of a larger, better game, I still think that the final product that we have is still a very worthwhile and pretty fun experience. It's just more amazing Dying Light parkour with even higher heights, more things to jump on, and more moves to pull off. First-person traversal has literally never been better. And the combat, although not as physically impactful or even near as difficult as Dying Light 1, it's still pretty fun in its own right. It's a faster paced hack and slash feeling game with some sweet weapon designs and variety, along with some smoothed out human combat with better dodging and blocking. And it's still a really good time to cut your foes down into bloody chunks. And there's a shit ton of new side content and activities to do, even if the more structured and narrative side quests are a bit of a step back from Dying Light 1. The sheer volume of stuff to do is like triple or even quadruple that of Dying Light 1, giving you lots of more reason to keep playing than in the past, along with making the city feel denser and more interesting than ever. You could play this game endlessly if you really wanted to, but I doubt many people still do. In the story? Well, it's the Dying Light 2 story. It's the resurrected shell of a much larger dead creature. And with the other controversies, overhauls, scrappings, and reworks of this game's story, I'm still kind of impressed that it's even coherent at all. And overall, Dying Light 2 is just more Dying Light at the end of the day, and I think all of its positives easily outweigh its negatives when it's all said and done. And as it stands, Dying Light 2 is a very, very solid game in 2026, all things considered, despite how much better and ambitious it could have been. But with that, let's move on to the final and most recent Dying Light experience, Dying Light The Beast. Dying Light The Beast was a game I didn't expect to see. I assumed Dying Light 3 would be the next game, but it probably wouldn't come out until like 2029 or something, based on the recent Techland development trends. But no, in the fall of 2025, Techland dropped The Beast on us, the third Dying Light game featuring returning protagonist Kyle Crane, who has been locked in an evil lab for the last 13 years in-game. And in real life, he's been in digital purgatory for 10 years, with Dying Light gamers unsure if he was now a family-devouring volatile, or if he was looking like the burned food remnants in the bottom of your air fryer. And originally, The Beast was going to be a DLC expansion for Dying Light 2, much like the following, as shown by ads for Castor Woods on buildings in Dying Light 2, the setting of The Beast. However, Techland decided to make The Beast a whole standalone game, and not just a Dying Light 2 expansion, as they wanted to tell a bigger story than planned, along with making some solid upgrades to their Chrome engine, that we'll see soon. But how beastly did The Beast end up being? Let's take a look. The game starts with Kyle telling us his backstory and the plot of Dying Light 1, which we are all well aware of by now, thanks to the video that you're watching.
My name is Kyle Crane, and I survived the apocalypse. But the biggest monster of all was Rice.
We learned that the kill the mother and become a volatile ending was the canon ending to the following. And we also learned that a few years after Crane assumedly ate that family, he was eventually captured by GRE operatives and locked in an unknown lab, where they treated him like the world's most tortured lab rat. And we see a peak natty physique shirtless Kyle Crane being wheeled to an experiment table, where he gets clamped to a metal bed and then gets tortured by machines jabbing him with some scary looking needles, testing his volatile powers and his physical attributes. And it seems like these tests also gave him an evil eye and a badass red vein scar, and an unkempt but tastefully rugged beard. Kyle says that the pain from this experimentation is so intense that he's long accepted his own death, and the only thing he feels besides pain is a burning rage to kill the man who's conducting all these experiments. Some dastardly, well-dressed bastard only known as the Baron, for now. However, as we're being experimented on, some homeless guys break in and try to free Crane, but our would-be heroes are captured, and we get more injections as some punishment. We then come face to face with the Baron, where he tells us that he's getting rid of Crane for being too stubborn and annoying as a test subject, and that he's found a newer, better, and more compliant subject to work with. But this new subject's face is conveniently hidden by a lab monitor, so I wonder who the new subject actually is.
Rice.
But as the Baron gives Crane some more yummy injections, the new subject breaks containment and goes gorilla mode on the lab, and we then wake up on the floor near an active radio, where a woman's voice guides us on how to get out of the lab, and we follow her lead, get a shirt on for the first time in 13 years, and do some tutorials to escape the lab and its zombie jail. And once outside, the voice on the radio tells us to meet her at the cathedral, and we get a good look at Castor Woods itself. It's a vaguely British town in the scenic countryside with a national park. At least it seems quite British. Most everybody's got a British accent.
I better get to the point. My father's got dementia and disappeared 2 days ago.
Too resilient, stubborn, rebellious, which is why I'm writing you off.
It's also got an industrial zone, large open fields, a smaller resort town, a castle overlooking the whole valley, and Bober the Beaver, the Castor Woods mascot. And we enter the cathedral and meet our savior, another W. Huz named Olivia.
Wait, just wait.
Who the hell are
Olivia.
Who says that she wants to help Crane, as she thinks Crane can help her get away from Castor Woods. She tells us that she was a prisoner in the Baron's torture labs too, and she tells us that the Baron runs the whole of Castor Woods Valley with an iron grip, wielding a whole private army under his command too. And Kyle is seething with rage and wants to kill the Baron immediately. And Olivia will help us do that, but she says that Crane is in no condition to try and challenge him yet. And Kyle needs to get stronger, get better equipment, and get allies to help him take down the Baron. And we first need to juice up Crane with some GSBs, some secret MacGuffin sauce from the Baron's lab that'll make Crane stronger and power up his beast mode. And luckily for us, we can extract GSB from chimeras, powered up special infecteds that were juiced up with Crane's own juices by the Baron, who has now set them loose all over Castor Woods to see how they perform in the wild. And even luckier for us, there's a giant raging chimera here to see us in the cathedral courtyard as we speak, so we take it head on with a classic looking Dying Light machete. And this zombie boss, called the Reaper, is pretty powerful. But as we fight, the red bar below our minimalist health bar will fill up, and when it does, Kyle can no longer control his rage, and like a werewolf, he unleashes the beast within, and we go beast mode. Literally. It's called beast mode, where Kyle becomes a human with the strength of a volatile, and he can tear zombies and the Baron's soldiers to shreds with just his bare hands, and we use it to take down the Chimera, who's honestly no slouch for a tutorial boss, I gotta say. but when it dies, we extract its GSB juices, which we then use to power up our beast mode with a straightforward perk tree. And I'll discuss the beast mode in more detail after the story, as it's the biggest change in the game from Dying Light 2. But then Kyle passes out from beast mode over exertion, and Olivia heals him with the GSB juice. But he accidentally chokes her out while having a PTSD flashback to killing a zombified Jade. We then learn about who exactly the Baron is, and it turns out he's some jabroni named Marius Fisher, who was a filthy rich biotech CEO until the apocalypse happened. And he's now using his vast resources to create some kind of zombie army out of mutated but controllable chimera beasts, along with some human volatile hybrids like Crane and the other unknown test subject. But for now, we need friends if we're going to try and take on the Baron and his goons. So Olivia sends us to find survivors in the main town, while she locates more chimeras for us to kill and drain of their juices. And we reach the town hall and find a complete massacre scene, with another chimera inside, looking like a roided up volatile who got left in a boiling pot of water or something. The Defect, who we beat the shit out of. We then meet the town hall survivors, another fairly generic group of well-to-do survivors, who thank Kyle for saving them and point us to help out their leader, a stern lady known as the Sheriff, to help her get the power back on. And we do a Dying Light 2 wire puzzle to get all the lights back up. And we then get the survivors back on their feet, but they're still scared of a monster they call the Beast, who they encountered before we arrived. And the Beast is not the meaty volatile we killed. It's the other anonymous test subject who went beast mode in the lab. Also, one of the survivors we met killed himself after being bitten, and Kyle learns from Olivia that Antizen supplies ran out long ago, and she tells him that UV light can help stave off the virus, but you still might turn regardless, which makes the Haran virus here feel pretty inconsistent, as Hakon in Dying Light 2 said everyone in Villador is infected, but they've been able to stay human for years, despite the infection incubating in their bodies the whole time. And they even had biomarkers to track your virus progress, and you wouldn't turn as long as you didn't stay in the darkness for more than like 9 minutes at a time. But now, Kyle Crane doesn't need no bitch-ass biomarker. He can just tank that darkness easily from all those tests and injections and volatile juice he drank in the following. And there's no need for a countdown at night. And the other survivors don't seem to know that you just need to stay in the light to not turn. But I guess they have no biomarkers and they wouldn't know how close they are to turning. Therefore, thinking a bite is game over for your life is probably a safe mindset to have here. But still, the rules for the Dying Light Haran virus seem pretty inconsistent here, and it's now more in line with how it was in Dying Light 1. Also, Kyle's dialogue throughout the entire game is just hilarious. He just wants to kill the Baron and to go home, and he always gets super annoyed with all the video gamey roadblocks he encounters throughout the story.
Says the guy who just saved your collective asses!
First ugly motherfucking cocksucker from my collection. Fucking telepathy, you've gotta be kidding me. You got any more levels of difficulty, Doc? Like, should I do it blindfolded? How about backwards?
He wants to be an asshole killer guy so bad too, but his nice, gotta help everybody nature always wins out in the end.
Okay, that's crazy. But, well, if that's what you need, fine. I'll get that sample for you.
So he might cuss a quest giver out now, but he'll still put his life on the line for him regardless. But now we have to chase after the Beast himself, so we strike out through the night to find him. And we find the Beast jumping around inhumanly fast, and we eventually corner it in a train tunnel, where it attacks Crane, but it seems to show interest in him before being blown up by a nearby wounded soldier. So after that whole ordeal, Olivia then tells us she tracked a Chimera transport to the swamps, and we go to investigate, and we soon find the third Chimera, a juiced up hag called the Mist, that can puff into a cloud of mist, and then dive bomb its prey through its zombified biological smoke bomb powers. And it's actually a pretty fun fight that almost feels like a Witcher enemy. And we then get the power plant back up and working again for the survivors to help further ingratiate ourselves with them. But the fat guy living at the power plant then sells us out to the Baron, but we just go beast mode and obliterate them all. And it turns out the Baron shut down the power plant, so it looks like he's going to take out the survivors pretty soon. And Kyle wants them to take up arms against the Baron, but the Sheriff is vehemently against a conflict with the Baron and his army, as she's worried that all the survivors will be killed by his big scary army and his big scary Chimera beasts. And sure, they have more men and equipment and even hulked up superpowered zombies, but we got one pissed off white boy, so it's an even fight. All we need is some courage. We then gotta go check out this brutalist war monument, as the Baron's men have been spotted there doing some suspicious work. And when we arrive, we find a strange destroyed device that we've seen at other Chimera locations too, which will then send us on a wild goose chase to the industrial zone, where we eventually learn from a scientist that we corner that these strange devices are used to spread Chimera attracting gas from a gas canister. So we transport a canister to a junkyard with a working dispenser, and it does indeed summon a Chimera, the Behemoth. And this thing looks like the half-Thor Bjornsson of volatiles. But we simply make him do some cardio, and he immediately loses all his gains and dies. and we then run its juices back to Olivia, where Kyle then says that he doesn't want to keep injecting himself with dubious mutant zombie monster blood, and he needs a little break. And we then contact the sheriff about the Baron's movements, and she says that she spotted his men working out of a salt mine nearby, and we go to meet her to see what's up. And she says that she saw the Baron himself enter the mine, so now might be our chance to finally take him out. So we get inside the mine after taking out the patrolling goons, but once we reach the end of the mine, the sheriff appears and ups pull on Crane. She betrayed and sold us out to the Baron to try and protect her people, as the Baron's army is just way too big and scary. Then the Baron himself appears to evilly gloat at his excellently planned betrayal, but Kyle fights back and opens the large holding cell behind him, which contains the Beast himself, who we get a better look at, and it's revealed that he's a muscular dude covered in blood with disheveled hair and a beard. Okay, gotcha. Who's that? But he jumps away and escapes, and the Baron collapses the mine with a grenade launcher after spitting a really cheesy line.
Damn it, I need him alive! But you, Crane, I need dead! Oh, brother!
And after Crane escapes the mine, we call the sheriff to swear vengeance on her.
Yeah, and I'm coming for you.
And we head back to the town hall to chew her ass out for her betrayal. However, when we arrive, the sheriff is gone. But the second in command here, Jacob, who looks like he's been Morgan Freeman maxing, says that he didn't even know about the betrayal, so it seems that the sheriff acted alone here at least. And Crane demands all the intel they got so he can go and kill the Baron. But Jacob says that they got nothing. Their survivor intelligence agencies are garbage, I guess. But he says that he may know some people who do have some information. And he tells Kyle to get in contact with an exiled group of survivors who are hiding out somewhere in Castor Woods, after the sheriff had cast them all out. Jacob says that these exiles are all infected, but we're able to stop the infection from completely taking over their bodies with an infusion made from UV shrooms. And Jacob will get us in contact with some of them, but not in a way we were expecting. We're contacted via direct telepathic communication by one of the exiles.
Crane, can you hear me?
What the hell?
As they all have telepathic communication powers, like the mother did. And since Kyle is also an infected, he can receive these magic zombie voice memos in his head. And Crane absolutely hates these direct-to-mind voicemail messages.
I'll see if I can track him down, but do me a favor.
Stay the hell out of your head?
Are you reading my mind again, Sven?
So we find and rescue our telepath from some of the Baron's men. And we find out it's a guy named Sven, who has glowing blue volatile eyes, bluish skin and purple lips, and bluish veins all over his orbital bones too. And he says that he'll help us if we help him, and he sends us to find members of his scouting squad who ended up disappearing. And we find them captured by the Baron's men, so we catch up to them and take out the soldiers. But the boys are fading fast and they need a shroom injection ASAP, so we drive them back to their cozy cave base, where we meet the rest of the blue-eyed psychic survivors. It's looking like an Agarthan refugee camp in here, including their leader Lydia, who is angry at Sven for going out to do recon and then bringing the Baron's biggest op, Kyle Crane, back home with him, as these moves are sure to bring down the Baron's wrath on the exiles' cave base. And we also learn that these exiles are also former test subjects of the Baron, so the fact that they haven't turned yet is probably thanks to the injections that he loves so much. And Lydia, like the sheriff, is scared shitless of the Baron's big scary army and tells us to take a hike so the exiles don't get caught in any potential crossfire. But Sven is still chill with us, so he invites us to meet this alt radio tech girl named Selby. Name me a psychic infected zombie huzz. Who then sends us to plant an amplifier on a super tall tower that only Crane can climb to jack into the Baron's comms chatter. And our guy has plenty of experience in this field. And we also get a grappling hook to help us get around better, which is the same as it was in Dying Light 2. So we climb the tower. Just kidding, we actually got to climb 3 towers, the last one being in the Cathedral Belfry Tower too. And once we finally jack into the Baron's comms, we immediately hear that the Baron's men are going to blow up the town hall with explosives. So we warn Jacob that the Baron is going to blow up the whole block like Chief Keef when he goes to New Jersey. But no worries, we run in, disarm all the bombs, and kill all the soldiers as usual. So the sheriff sold us out for literally nothing. The Baron just tried to kill her people anyway. Common Sheriff L. But in the meantime, Olivia has another chimera for us to kill, which we fight in these cool-ass ancient ruins that kind of looks like a cross between Stonehenge and Göbekli Tepe. So we use the chimera tractor gas to summon this crazy-looking spitter chimera that's called Toxin, who jumps around the ancient stone pillars like it's the Twilight Princess boomerang monkey boss, who we kill with a brutal face punch barrage. And Sven then speaks directly into Kyle's amygdala to tell him that the Baron has been running experiments in a nearby school, but bandits have recently attacked the place, so we can use the chaos as an opportunity to break in and see what's going on in there. And even Lydia is on board now. It seems that she's finally warming up to Kyle, So we bust into the school, kill the zombies and bandits within, and find another one of the Baron's scientists, a Mr. Dr. Camilo Marin, a way better source of info than some memos and lab reports, and he seems perfectly willing to come along with us. So we clear the basement of biters, and Camilo hands us a key to the Baron's main archive as thanks for not killing him. So we steal some top secret documents out of an IKEA cabinet, and then bug out of the school after killing another platoon of Baron soldiers. And we run the research documents back to Lydia and the exiles, but along the way, we learn that the scientist, along with another exile we sent named Ray, haven't returned yet. So we go out and find that Ray crashed his car and killed himself. Damn. But luckily, Dr. Camilo is alive and hiding in a nearby house, and the rest of the exiles show up to extract Camilo, with Lydia finally saying she trusts Kyle and thanks him for all his help thus far. But we still need more allies. We aren't ready to take on the Baron quite yet. We would need to somehow get the Town Hall survivors and exiles to ally together. And we also get a literal big iron as a reward. Nice. And we meet Olivia again and hand over some of the data we found. And she has another chimera for us, another hack called the Matriarch, who runs and hides as her main gimmick. And we gotta use this waveform HUD to locate her hiding spot to do a little BTA. So we kill the thing and run the samples back to Olivia, where she reveals that this chimera summoning gas is actually a modified version of the blue zombie pacifying gas from the following. So it seems the Baron's plan is to create an army of these chimera creatures and then use the red fart gas to compel them to attack his enemies with overwhelming force. And Olivia also reveals that her father was the one who developed this new chimera rage gas, who she says was in Haran when the virus first broke out, and is now a slave. Her words, not mine, to the Baron.
So he works for him?
Not voluntarily. Slave labor. Same as me.
So we now have even more reason to kill him, I guess. Not really sure what I'm supposed to do with this information. We then meet with Lydia and Camilo at the Exile Cave, and she and Dr. Camilo say that there's a way for the exiles to increase their telepathic abilities. So much so, they'd be able to take over and command the minds of the non-sentient infected. Zombie mind control powers, baby. Lydia's about to turn into Samantha Maxis. Let's get it. But they need Crane's help to get a substance for an injection that'll power up their telepathy powers. But there's a catch. What they need is volatile plasma from a volatile larva, which is when those volatiles are stuck to the ground in a big gore pile and they seem to grow out of it. I guess those are the larvas? So we gotta dive into a volatile nest to get 3 samples of volatile plasma, so Lydia can become a sentient volatile who can psychically command hordes of zombies to do her bidding like it's classic COD zombies. The zombie apocalypse has gotten pretty weird over the last 13 years, so they lead Crane to a deep, dank, and dark cave. And as we get deeper, we actually run into another chimera, an armored up volatile with electric blue veins that can even turn invisible. And it's called the Wraith, and we take it on in the game's darkest fight yet. Literally. And it's another pretty tough fight, but its blue glowing veins betray its invisibility. And once we take it out, we can then harvest the volatile larva and sneak past the volatile nursery guards, and then escape a horde of sprinting volatiles out of the cave. How many times have I said volatile so far? We then go to meet Olivia again, where she reveals that her father was originally the one to bring Crane to the Baron after his capture, and apparently was the one who restored Crane's humanity after he went volatile rage mode on a helpless woman and her children, which made Kyle more or less the ultimate life form of the Dying Light universe, a human with his intelligence intact, but with the strength of an alpha volatile, which the Baron now wanted to replicate with Kyle Crane clones under his control, and the chimeras are the early results of this scientific endeavor. And pair that with Dr. Camilo's mind control experimentation, and the Baron would have direct psychic control over these zombie Hulk beasts, and the ultra-powerful human volatile hybrids like Crane. Psychically control the zombie armies? This ain't your grandpa's zombie apocalypse. But we then fight the next chimera in the water treatment plant nearby, and it's a hulking beast in a gas mask called the Colossus, who we brutally rip the head off of after another tough-ass fight. And with that, we fully powered up our beast powers, and we're almost ready to take on the Baron. We then relink with Lydia and Camilo. Lydia's already on her new volatile plasma cycle, and her mind is already powering up, but she needs a drug from the old asylum to fully unlock her zombie telepathy powers. But unfortunately, the asylum is full of infected, so it's another super dangerous quest. But Lydia's gonna help us by using her new zombie mind control powers a bit, but she can only do so much, as the mind control is very physically and mentally straining. So we get inside, and the mind control is working to start, and the virals and screamers all ignore us. And I love the screamers that look like volatiles in straitjackets. I think it goes hard. Even the full-grown volatiles are ignoring Crane for now, but they'll go psycho shit and break free of the mind control if Crane gets too close to them. So we sneak through the asylum, and by picking up files, we can find that many of the telepathic exiles were former patients here. So it seems the Baron was helping himself to the asylum's patients as a way to get plenty of free test subjects. But we soon find Lydia's mind control drugs in a cabinet, but an alarm goes off, which sends all the infected into a frenzy, breaking Lydia's control. We then escape the horde and give the drugs back to the dynamic duo here. But then we hear on the radio that the Baron is attacking the town hall again. So we head over immediately. But that worthless turncloak, the sheriff, contacts us via radio to apologize, and she's here to help us fight off the Baron's men and to tell Kyle where to attack them. So as usual, we kill all the soldiers and destroy their zombie rage gas mortars. Get that nasty shit out of here. And kill not one, not two, but 3 chimeras that were attracted by the Baron's red mist. But even a chimera gang squad can't step to fully beasted up Kyle Crane, as Lydia's new telepathy powers allow her to take over one of the giant muscle beasts to help us even the odds. And the sheriff then confronts and explains herself to us. The Baron caught her on patrol with her pants down and forced her to lure Crane into a trap. But she soon realized that the Baron's word was as good as the dirt beneath her feet, as he still attacked the town hall anyway, twice. So she's genuinely sorry about all that's happened and for going all Benedict Arnold on us. And Kyle Crane, still being a big old softy at heart despite being a half-zombie Hulk beast, forgives her. The exiles then pull up to the town hall, who have an awkward reunion with their banisher, where the sheriff admits that it was wrong to cast them out. She thought that they'd become cannibalistic monsters, not become some actually pretty chill psychic superhumans. But now the two factions are reunited, and we can finally band together to take on the Baron. And Kyle says that we can bait out the Baron if we can find and capture the beast that he's so obsessed with. So we hatch a plan to use the red gas to attract the beast right into a trap we lay. So to entice the beast, Kyle will drive around with a canister that's spewing red zombie catnip, and the beast takes the bait. And we lead him inside a cave, where we then have to weaken him so Lydia can penetrate his mind fortress and get him to just chill the hell out. And it's actually a pretty tough fight. The beast is fast as hell, so your dodges need to be Souls-esque to win. But Kyle beats the beast unconscious, and then Camila says we got to inject the beast with Kyle's blood plasma to turn him back into a human. Somehow. Which she injects right into his meaty pecs, which seems to finally subdue the beast. So they bring him back to the exile's cave, and Kyle comes later on to check on how he's doing. And Lydia wakes him up for the first time since he was subdued, and he wakes up with a shotgun in his face, confused and agitated, but as a human and not as a superhuman beast man. And the beast then finally reveals his identity, and we learn that it's Aiden?
I'm Aiden. My friend Spike and I were trying to rescue someone from the Baron, but it all went to shit.
From Dying Light 2? Aiden Babaden himself? I was honestly shocked that it was him. I didn't think Techland would actually do it, but here he is. And man, Aiden has been fucking looks maxing in the Baron's lab. He looks completely different. He went from looking like Barry Keoghan's cousin to a fucking Final Fantasy protagonist who also blasts Tren and has an IFBB card. But I think this new look works way better for him. It makes him look more mature and threatening, and not to mention sexy. Because this dude was baby-faced and extremely unthreatening in Dying Light 2. Aiden tells us that he was captured alongside his buddy Spike. Whoa, Spike showed up here too? Well, they were trying to rescue someone, but they instead got captured and tortured instead. So those two guys at the beginning were Spike and Aiden trying to free Crane. So I guess after the ending of Dying Light 2, Aiden just linked back up with Spike after leaving Villador. And I guess he decided, shit, I got nothing better to do besides wander around and feel sad about Mia dying and waiting to see if I turn into a full-time volatile. So I guess I'll help Spike rescue this Kyle Crane fellow that he always speaks so highly about. And the whole Dying Light series is converging together here. So Aiden, formerly known as the Beast, says Spike must still be imprisoned by the Baron, and then Selby shows up with the Baron on the radio, who demands we turn over Aiden, and we hear that he's got Olivia and Spike held hostage, and he'll do some real nasty shit to them if we don't give him his favorite boy toy back. But Aiden and Crane need to rest up before we can begin the final attack on the Baron. But when we wake up, we find that Aiden went back to the Baron on his own. A 0 IQ move, because we learn via radio that the Baron has recaptured Aiden. So now we lost our only trump card, and he now demands that Crane show his face too. So we plan an attack on the Baron's fortress via some old tunnels, and we get to work. So we get into his castle through the basement using some C4. Hope nobody heard that. And we then kill the guards outside to open the gates and let our allies in, where a huge firefight breaks out, and poor Sven gets boomed by a guard while trying to help a wounded survivor, killing him, which makes Lydia summon a horde of virals to attack the palace. But then the Baron sends in more Chimera meat goons and just regular goons, so Kyle heads off to chase after the Baron alone, and we shoot up his whole mansion like it's a Call of Duty level. We then drive through a tunnel to reach the Baron's zombie labs, and have to take on more goons and chimeras, until we eventually find and free Aiden. But then Olivia appears, and traps us in the room with Aiden, and knocks us out with some dubious gas. I knew something was up with Olivia. It was clear she wasn't telling us her full story, and now it seems that she was working with the Baron the whole time. And we then wake up clamped to a chair, and seated at a lavish dinner table, with all our best buds also clamped down to their chairs, Spike included. And then the Baron walks in to evil Max and lord over his captives, and he reveals that Crane's escape was all pre-planned, and killing the Chimeras and shooting up GSB was all part of a field test, which honestly sounds like a cope to try and save face. The Beast really did a number on his lab facilities, and then he had to lose a bunch of men trying to chase and recapture him. I don't think he intended for all that to happen. But regardless, it worked out for him anyway, and now he's got an army of meaty muscular zombies under his command, and Kyle and Aiden's special infected DNA. He has now captured all of his enemies. So to celebrate, he takes a knife and gruesomely slits Spike's throat open to show how callous and cruel he is, and he stabs Dr. Camilo in the neck too, all in a sick, twisted display to torture Crane emotionally. But Olivia stands up and pleads with the Baron to stop the killing. So the Baron then decides to hand Olivia a gun and forces her to shoot Crane, where she then reveals that her father was bitten and infected, and the Baron would only help him if Olivia helped Crane kill the Chimeras and increase his infected power level. And she then tries to shoot the Baron for being a sociopathic supervillain, but the gun is unloaded, and the Baron pins her down. But then Lydia hits him with a mind invasion. 6,000 hours of Agarth and Kirk edits right to the dome, which then gives Olivia an opening to stab his eye with a fork, and she frees Crane and our friends as the Baron wails in agony and stumbles around like an oaf. And Aiden and Kyle get strapped up and make chase after Baron Bad Guy over here, and we confront him on the snowy rooftop helipad and start the final boss battle with the Baron, who's running around with a grenade launcher, and when you get close to wail on him, he drops a huge green fart bomb as a get off me move. Well, you gotta deal with a gang squad of soldiers, and this first phase is a pretty mid fight all in all. But once we beat the goddamn shit out of the Baron in his human form, he decides to go rich piano mode and to leave humanity behind, and he injects himself with Kyle's perfected GSB blood that makes him transform into a massive muscled and meaty volatile with his intelligence still intact. But even this ultimate life form is no match for one really pissed off white boy named after a bird. And we go beast mode a few times and pummel his ass again, and then Kyle remembers all the pain and suffering the Baron put him through, so he beats down this beast with just his arms and legs and drop kicks him off the roof and onto a rock. But he's still not dead, so Kyle grabs a pipe and spears it right down into the Baron's heart, finally killing him, and we finally complete our revenge quest. But all of a sudden, an ominous helicopter appears behind us, and we hear the
"It's good to hear your voice, Kyle. I guess our story wasn't over."
Is that the GRE handler lady from DL1 talking to us? And she greets Kyle after 13 years. And Kyle's reaction is also my reaction to this information.
You? Are you fucking kidding me?
She reveals that the GRE is indeed still around, and they were in league with the Baron. But it seems he got a little too big for his britches, and the GRE actually wanted to take him out, which Crane inadvertently provided an excellent service in. And then the GRE lady then says, "Hey, can we let bygones be bygones? You're actually pretty good at your job, man." But Kyle is seething at them, and he promises to go after the GRE, and then Aiden and Lydia show up to menacingly stare at the chopper with Kyle, showing that they're going to take the fight right to the GRE and end all this bullshit for good, as the chopper flies directly into the setting sun. And with that, the Beast and the story of Dying Light as a whole comes to a close. Well, for now. I guess Dying Light 3 is up next, since they left the door for a sequel wide open. Hell, they ripped it off its hinges, with the GRE coming back out of nowhere and the protagonists Kyle Crane and Aiden Caldwell finally linking up. It seems like a Dying Light 3 is all but inevitable. As for the actual story itself, well, it's obvious that the story here is an expanded DLC. It's way smaller scale than the previous games, and it's gotta be the shortest story in terms of how many missions there actually are. It's great to have Kyle, the Guile Crane, back as our protagonist, and I thought his dialogue was pretty damn hilarious and self-aware at times, in the way he gets irritated at roadblocks, stubborn survivors, and just being forced to do video gamey things was always super enjoyable to me. And the way he tries to be a revenge-obsessed beast of a man, but still ends up being the same old suicidally helpful and honest Kyle Crane of old, was very true to his character, and just made me like him even more than ever. He's got some good zingers here. And the voice performance from Roger Craig Smith is still rock solid. I was a bit skeptical about the telepathic infected survivors at first, as it seemed really out there and sci-fi for a zombie game, but then I think to myself, are telepathic infected humans any weirder than, say, a virus that mutates humans into strange monsters like toads, goons, demolishers, and even volatiles, who have literal superhuman strength and speed and are made by growing them out of human gore piles? And so on. Not to mention the Chimera bosses that seem ripped right out of Resident Evil or something. And it's not like telepathy is a new concept for Dying Light. There was actually a decent amount of depth to them, as some of the side quests expand on what life is like for the exiles, and how they deal with the fact that an essentially magic virus that turns them into uncontrollable rage beasts is forever stuck in their bodies as they transform into blue-eyed hybrids, was pretty compelling in the side content, which I'll talk about soon. And the Baron, like previous Dying Light villains before, is pretty cartoonishly evil and one-dimensional. The Baron is like Rise, if Rise was a rich evil scientist instead of a bandit warlord. And the way he speaks and carries himself in cutscenes, the dude is just straight up nefarious for the sake of it. And his main goals are to just create a roided up zombie army and to turn himself into a House of the Dead boss or an even more ultimate life form, which is not the most interesting or compelling stuff in my opinion. And the reveal of the Beast being Aiden feels incredibly contrived, I can't lie. It feels like I'm reading a fanfic or something. But fuck it. I still enjoyed seeing Kyle and Aiden just interact, plus his new Looks Max design suits him much better. Another fellow bearded brother I see. Also, they just did poor Spike so dirty here. He survived Haran and escaped, lived for 13 years as a pilgrim in a super dangerous zombie-infested world, all to get his throat slashed by a pompous evil twink guy. Tough scene. And Olivia also seemed bound to betray us the entire game due to her vague dialogue and the inordinate amount of knowledge she had about the GSBs and the Chimeras and about going beast mode. But at least her betrayal was still a pretty good moment that paid off her character well enough. But interestingly enough, despite her father being the main driving force behind her actions, we never actually end up seeing him at all, which reduces the impact of her arc a bit, because she could just be lying about her father. He never actually shows up to confirm her words. But overall, you can clearly tell that this was a DLC-sized story that was expanded into a full game, which isn't bad, but it also doesn't come close to the previous game's story scales and set pieces, beyond the final bombastic assault on the Baron's castle. But moving on to parkour. As usual, it's great, and it's based off Dying Light 2's system, so Kyle now has the same parkour abilities and upgrades as Aiden, like being able to swing from bars, ropes, settling on ledges, a swinging grappling hook, and so on. The only main difference being that Kyle does not have the same moonjump skills that would make even Michael Jordan himself kneel, like Aiden did in Dying Light 2. His hops are about the same as Dying Light 1, and in fact, the devs put a lot of effort into making Kyle feel almost the exact same as he did in Dying Light 1. The problem with the parkour here, though, is that it's extremely de-emphasized, as outside of the main town of Castor Woods, which is fun to run and jump around in for sure, the parkour just barely comes into play because it's mostly just open fields, small structures, and wooded/cliffside areas that all have very limited or very specific climbing spots. And the parkour hasn't been this de-emphasized since the following. Hell, I found the grappling hook to be mostly useless because there simply aren't a lot of opportunities or locations to even use it effectively. But at least in the following's case, that game had a customizable buggy with multiple upgrade parts and a whole skill tree to level up and invest into to make your buggy a beast in its own right. And driving is back for the beast, but instead of a customizable and upgradable buggy, you can only drive these pickup trucks, and there's no way to upgrade or modify them, outside of some cosmetic DLC skin options. And I mean, they handle good, and they're pretty fun to drive. It's like GTA. Jack a pickup, crash into zombies until it breaks or runs out of gas, and then leave it to go find another one. But you'll want to use these cars to quickly navigate around the pretty decently sized Castor Woods map. Otherwise, you gotta hoof it, which can be pretty boring when there's nothing to climb on or parkour over. It's just Kyle Crane wind sprinting through open fields, which also really makes me want a Dying Light 2-esque fast travel system in this game, so I don't have to make the same runs and drives to the exile camp at the top of the map and back. And if any Dying Light game needs a fast travel system, it's this one. But besides that, there's really not much else to write home about for parkour, as the Beast is far more interested in the combat, which is, by far, the best in the entire series. The combat in the Beast tries to go back to Dying Light 1's original combat feel, that brutal, physics-driven zombie head-smashing experience, where each zombie can be a potential threat to Kyle. And the zombies here are very, very grabby in the Beast. You'll be constantly fending off the grabbers who have no respect for personal space. And sometimes, two zombies will try and hop on you for a pretty cool dynamic grab attack. And overall, the combat here is some awesome shit. The physics from Dying Light 1 are fully back, and it honestly feels like an upgraded version of Dying Light 1's combat. The animations and ragdolls are now way better, and the hits just feel meatier. The sounds are visceral, and the dropkick feels great again to use, thanks Shang-Di. And the gore effects and zombie body damage is really awesome here. You can smash zombie heads open to expose their brains, expose zombie bones and guts with strikes to the body, and it's pretty gnarly to see these zombies still coming after you as their bodies are literally falling apart. You can slice off arms and legs with aimed strikes, and if you got a big sharp weapon, you can easily bisect zombies in half. And it just feels great to use a two-handed weapon and just sweep a biter's legs out from underneath it, and then crush its head with the head stomp. And if you kill a group of zombies, you'll leave behind a pile of gruesomely mutilated and smashed bodies, blood and body parts everywhere. It's so visceral looking and gory, I almost feel bad for the zombies. I really fuck their shit up, and it's awesome. However, the human combat has unfortunately regressed to its more Dying Light 1 style, where the human enemies can dodge your attacks and block them with zero telegraph. There's no more crusty lock-on dropkick move that's supposed to set the tone for the human fights, and enemies don't clearly hold their weapons out when blocking, so you gotta just swing and hope the hit gets blessed by RNGesus and it actually lands. So you know what that means. If you're into humans, just take out a gun, unless you want to spike your cortisol for no real reason. And as usual, there's plenty of weapons to use. Anything from bats, machetes, pipes, brass knuckles, funky looking glaives, and more. And the best weapon, of course, being Bober's stick, which can all be modified and upgraded like in past games. And it really just feels like a modernized, more advanced Dying Light 1. And I really enjoyed the zombie slaying here a lot. However, we gotta talk about the game's subtitle, as it adds a whole new mode of combat, the Beast Mode. and Techland must have looked at their Dying Light games and have been, yeah, these games are cool and all, but what they really need is a Hulk mode. So when you go beast mode, Kyle activates his volatile powers, and all he needs are his meaty fists to wreak complete havoc on hordes of zombies. You can punch them to death, smash them off their feet, do a spin move, charge them down, use the grappling hook like Scorpion, roar to knock back enemies, and do a massive jump, and then a subsequent ground pound slam. And at first, the beast mode will activate uncontrollably when the red beast rage bar fills up. You'll know you're close to going beast mode as Kyle's growls get louder and angrier as the beast fights to be unleashed. Which, as you kill chimeras and upgrade your beast skill tree, you'll soon be able to choose when to activate beast mode, which will then graduate into being able to go beast mode when your rage bar isn't even full, but it's still more than about 1/3 of the bar full. But you replenish health when activating a full bar beast mode, so it's often better to wait until you're fully ready to go beast mode. But activating it early allows you to get out of some sticky situations. And going beast mode is pretty beastly. Kyle punches zombies so hard they're knocked clean off their feet, and there's a ton of sweet animations of Kyle ripping zombies and Baron goons limb from limb, ripping them in half, ripping their heads off, putting his arm through their chests. He knocks over volatiles and stomps their head into a fine red paste. He can climb up the backs of chimera behemoths and rip their heads off. And my favorite finisher is against the goons, where Kyle catches their giant rebar club in midair and then caves the goon's chest in with its own weapon. It's so amazingly fire. And beast mode lets you decimate huge zombie groups, destroy the Baron's goons with ease, and even bring hulking monsters to their knees. But it also isn't the deepest combat in the world. It's mostly just spam clicking left mouse button with the occasional jump, slam, or spin move. It's literally a shut your brain off and tear shit up for a little bit mode. And it works perfectly for that purpose. But don't expect anything much deeper than that. But overall, it's very fun to unleash the inner beast, and I see why Techland wanted to make a whole DLC around this new mechanic. It's simple, but fun, and the carnage you can create is some sickeningly great shit. Finally, for combat, there's also a much bigger emphasis on boss battles with all the chimeras, and while some are definitely better than others, the Matriarch Hag is just kind of like the Witch of Hemwick from Bloodborne, and the Mist Hag was way more fun to fight. And the muscular chimeras felt pretty samey after you fought like 5 of them, but these boss battles were still pretty fun to do. The dodges and attacks are smooth and impactful, and it almost feels like first-person Bloodborne in a way, going in for attacks, taking a swing or two, and then dodging out of the way to avoid follow-up attacks, and rinse and repeat until you build up beast mode, and then just go ham on their oversized asses. And the game's difficulty balancing feels really good here too. Even on its normal difficulty, it's still fairly challenging, but not overly annoying. And as a plus, virals are easier to deal with, and they don't just spam and swarm you. Hell, their designs even harken back to the original Dying Light 1 virals, but I still died plenty of times during my playthrough. So overall, the game's combat and beast mode are simple, but extremely effective, and it's the best combat in the whole Dying Light series by a solid distance. And moving on to the side content and the world itself, the beast doesn't have a ton of side quests, but each one tells a wild or heartbreaking story that I found myself really liking. For example, take the quest you do with Starchild, a mushroom farmer from the exile camp. His first quest will have you gather a gallbladder and the bark of a, quote, tree of madness, where we stumble upon a house where a group of infected survivors who escaped the Baron decided to lock themselves in the basement and wait to turn and die, so they wouldn't be able to hurt anyone after they turned, with the names of the people who died here written on the walls, leaving behind notes on how scared and alone they felt while waiting to turn. And there's these really strange drawings on the walls that gives us a mysterious glimpse into the minds of those infected and on the verge of turning. And in the same quest, we visit a psychic talking tree that seems to be infected with the virus, as zombies come to this tree to die and be absorbed by its roots. And when we shave some bark off of it, the tree bleeds and even wails in agony. God damn. Making us wonder if the virus is now jumping to other life forms like plants and trees, and what that might mean. Nothing good, I'm sure. A zombie tree. What's next? Some zombie weed? Zombie opium? And his next quest is even weirder, where he asks us to find a missing exile, only to find that the guy who went missing had been assimilated into some sort of hive mind of corpses, and we hear its collective voice calling out to us in Kyle's head.
Good. They're dead. Now come to us.
What the hell is going on?
Before we kill the missing exile stuck in the hive mind's meaty grasp. And all these Starchild quests are great, and they raise new interesting questions about the virus and what horrific shit it's capable of. Can it spread to non-humans and even plants? Is it alive like a hive mind? Do we have a THV Gravemind situation going on here? Who knows? but I love it anyway. Another quest will have you investigate an overrun island commune, only to learn that its quest givers had killed the entire community by letting zombies onto the island and disabling the UV lights. And another quest had me looking for this moody kid's asshole dementia-ridden deadbeat dad. And we find him in a cave and learn that he was broken over the guilt of helping gather up suspected infected and unvaccinated people and leaving them in this cave when the virus first broke out, which caused these people to be locked in a death trap with turning infected. So he has us rig the place to blow, and he lets himself get blown up too. All the while he thinks Kyle is his moody son, and it's low-key heartbreaking.
Give your old man a hug.
Sure.
Forgive me. I was weak.
I did another quest to rescue this exiled couple who had left the cave, but the man dies, and then we gotta tell his pregnant partner that he's dead. And we can even meet her back later at the cave and find her extremely depressed and not sure how to continue on without him. And it really does an excellent job at humanizing these exiles and showing us that despite having telepathy from a borderline magic virus, they still have the same understandably human struggles. And there's another quest where you have to help a duo of exile brothers, and one of them is sick, and he says he needs medication. But when we can't find the meds at a pharmacy, he instead tells us to get a t-shirt of his father's band, along with some wine, and a drawing of their family from the mountain resort that they used to own. But then we learned that the quest giver was going to die in turn soon, with or without medication. So as a last act, he misled Crane into preparing a parting gift package for his poor brother, to remember him and their family by, and to hold on to the hope of life and staying human in an infected world. It's tough, man. Rip Liam. But it's great stuff. And it's honestly kind of crazy to me that in a game with roided up monster zombies, a guy who can turn into a human-sized Hulk, and telepathic infected survivors who can juice up their psychic powers to control zombies directly, the game still finds time to show us the tragedy of loss and grief in a ruined world and what it means to be human. And the side quests here are some of the best in the entire series, even if there aren't a whole lot of them. And that leaves the map of Castor Woods to go over, which in terms of activities and stuff to do, has taken a huge step back from Dying Light 2. In that game, there was a huge amount of dark zones, GRE facilities and anomalies, enemy bases, towers, water towers, power plants, windmills, and so on. Now we have safe zones that we can set up and capture, dark zones like stores and pharmacies, which are very small buildings full of plenty of loot and crafting materials. We now got substations, where you fight a horde of zombies and a special infected, and then hook up the power cables to get the electricity back up and running. We can also turn on survival towers too, take out extremely small volatile hives for high tier loot, loot military convoys for weapons, ammo and other gear, and that's more or less it. Nighttime has once again been mostly relegated to an optional hard mode to more quickly grind out levels. But if you're not in the main Castor Woods town area, it's not even worth going out at night, as there's roaming volatiles absolutely everywhere, and if you're in an open field, it's very easy for them to spot you, as there's very little obstacles or climbable architecture to help you get away from them. And these volatiles can run faster than you, so you're cooked if you're spotted out in the open. But besides all of that, there's of course Easter egg hunting, where you can find Bober the Beaver's secret safe zone by finding 6 logs and then rebuilding a beaver dam in the western part of the map. And if you sleep, you'll wake up to find a zombified Bober attacking you. And Kyle says the whole Bober Kurwa line's all in Polish, and I fucking love this. You also get a super powerful stick weapon as a reward. But besides these small activities and the side quests, there really isn't much else to do in Castor Woods besides run around and kill zombies until you get bored or something. And it's a pretty big step back from Dying Light 2's myriad of side content and activities. But at least the beast crafting system has been streamlined and is way less cluttered from Dying Light 2. No more infected tokens and mutation samples and agent reps and levels 1 through 9 upgrades for each consumable item blueprint. No more needing to go to craft masters to buy repairs and blueprint upgrades. We can do all that shit ourselves at a new workbench, and it works so much better. It's less bloated and cluttered and scattered, and it makes weapon upgrading a total breeze. Also, there's no more separate leveling for parkour and combat, and everything now falls under a way more streamlined overall level, where you get skill points for each level up, and you can then spend them on parkour, combat, or stealth or utility options in any order you choose, which is fine, but it makes the progression feel even less relevant and less noticeable than ever, and removing the distinct parkour and combat level progression was disappointing to me. I always like seeing parkour or combat numbers go up with each action, but I guess it makes sense here. There's so little parkour to do compared to combat, your combat level would totally eclipse your parkour level. But overall, and as a complete package, the Beast has great return to form physics, great as always parkour and climbing, awesome gory combat, a new fun as hell kill everyone in sight Beast Hulk mode, great graphics, an okay but admittedly fun story, and a decently sized map with plenty of surprisingly great side quests to do. But besides these positives, the Beast suffers from an existence as an expanded DLC, and you can tell that's exactly what it is. It has less stuff to do than in Dying Light 2, a smaller story than even Dying Light 1, and large open empty areas with not a whole lot going on in them. The leveling system is more simplified and streamlined than ever, and the Beast really makes no new innovations to the Dying Light formula. It's still a very enjoyable game for me, don't get me wrong, but outside of Beast Mode, it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. It is more of a correction and a response to fan criticisms, and a return to form from the complaints that people had about Dying Light 2, like the scaled back physics, and of course, the return of the surprisingly likable OG protagonist Kyle Crane. And like the following, it feels more like an expansion or a half sequel, rather than another step in Dying Light's evolution. But bottom line, if you like Dying Light, especially Dying Light 1, I definitely recommend you play the Beast. And it doesn't have the best story or the most to do, but the engine upgrades, physical and brutal combat, and fun as all hell Beast Mode managed to capture that original Dying Light 1 magic, and it reminded me that, yeah, Dying Light is still the best first-person zombie game series around. And I'm interested to see what Techland does next with the series, as the story is left on a cliffhanger. And there's lots of ways to take the story with Kyle and Aiden meeting up and working together, so it seems like another Dying Light game will come one day. I just hope Tencent doesn't meddle too much. But now that we've covered all the Dying Light games, it's time to finally rank these bastards and see which one is the true Dying Light God. And in last place, in the worst Dying Light game in the series, is Dying Light the Beast. As despite the great combat, physics, gore effects, and side quests, the Beast can't be anywhere but last place. It's got the smallest scale story, the worst map in the series, a de-emphasis on the great parkour mechanics, and a lack of side content and activities that all hold the game back from being great. And it really does feel like a DLC that was later made into a full-scale game, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it simply limits the game's scope from its very conception. And it offers no actual innovations to the Dying Light formula besides the fun yet simple Beast Mode and the engine enhancements, making it the worst game in the Dying Light series mostly by default. But it's still a pretty solid and fun game overall though. And in second place, the runner-up, we got Dying Light 2. And there's a lot of things Dying Light 2 does much better than Dying Light 1. The parkour is way better and is the best in the series, full stop. There's just so many potential movement options with the new grappling hook, parkour moves, and the paraglider, all of which is amazingly complemented by Villador's design, verticality, and the fact that it feels like a massive open-air jungle gym that makes running through the city a total joy. There's a metric shit ton of side activities for both day and night that were much needed from Dying Light 1, and the combat is still pretty fun, despite being less physical and realistic, and is more hack and slashy. But this game still has plenty of flaws that hold it back from the #1 spot. The story is just a complete mess. It's scattered and confusing, the villain is terrible, most of the characters aren't very likable, and it's really unsatisfying across pretty much all endings. The side quests are far more quantity over quality, and the physics have taken a disappointing step back from Dying Light 1, and the moves like the dropkick and the stomp are way less satisfying to pull off now. Plus, human combat going from annoying as shit to mid at best, along with uninspired live service grinds making up most of the late game content, holds Dying Light 2 back from being a truly excellent game. But overall, I think this game ended up pretty well after everything it went through. 7 years, delays, staff chaos, and controversy. I'm just glad this thing came out at all, and I still overall really like this game at the end of the day, despite all its flaws. And in first place, in the Dying Light God of the franchise, we got Dying Light 1 plus the following, the one that started it all. It may not have the best parkour, combat, map scale, or even story, but as a complete package with the following, it's simply the best overall Dying Light experience. The setting and concept are both really great. Haran is perfectly crafted to complement the parkour mechanics, and being able to get noticeably faster and better at climbing was always super satisfying to me. And the story, while not great by any means, is still really solid with actually likable characters, great moments and set pieces, and it isn't a total mess like its sequel. In fact, I'd argue it's more or less the perfect length. The combat is surprisingly brutal and satisfying, helped greatly by some excellent physics and fun as fuck moves like the dropkick and the head stomp. The only issues I have with combat being the viral spam and when you're fighting against humans, who explicitly have inhuman reaction speeds with their dodges and blocks, and shooting is the textbook definition of mid. And the side quests here are mostly simple mechanically, yet are very memorable, funny, weird, or even tragic at times. And they do an excellent job of maintaining the uniquely bleak, but at sometimes completely unserious and irreverent tone of Dying Light. And it's just an incredible package. And with the following included, which adds a whole nother 8 to 16 hours of gameplay, with a fun new buggy to drive, a surprisingly large open world to explore, and a pretty insane but intriguing story, along with new interesting activities like volatile nests, plus a huge helping of even more interesting and freaky side quests. It all combines to make Dying Light 1 my favorite of the series, and the Dying Light game I'd pick up over the others on any given day. All hail the OG. But that's all I got for you. I hope this video won't be too long, and I'm sorry this took so goddamn long to release. I promise to be faster in the future. But if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. And let me know if you agree, disagree? Tell me why my opinions are straight doo-doo feces in the comments, and which game you think is the actual best. I'd love to hear what you think, but I'll leave you on that. And I love you all very much. Goodbye.